Hello, everyone. This is Ed Denzel, host of Unfound. I wonder if you will consider becoming a supporter of this YouTube channel. By pressing the join button below, you can receive, for just 10 cents a day, the video version of the podcast a day early, the Unfound Now episodes a week early, daily video updates from yours truly, and cool emojis to use during the Monday night live show. Please consider it as you watch the following spectacular video. Thanks. Beau Michael Mann was a 39-year-old from Los Angeles, California. He was a tech entrepreneur who had lived all over the United States. On November 30th, 2021, Beau took multiple Lyft and Uber rides, with him finally getting dropped off at an address in Santa Monica. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. Cars, trucks, boats, vehicles in general play a huge role in many disappearances. Why? Because we are around them all the time. Despite more and more people working from home, for example, with every passing year. And this applies no matter if the missing person was the driver or the passenger. Some examples for unfound missing people who were riders. Sky Tossick took an Uber ride and never came back. In fact, his case is similar to ours today. Stephanie Hartwell got in a car with her best frenemy, never to be seen again. Leanne Hosberg got a ride from a car service in New York City. She was 14. She is still missing. There are many disappearances we've covered like this on Unfound. We also can't forget the Marco Island 3. 4 guys go out on a boat, only one comes back. And for disappearances involving drivers that we've covered on Unfound, we can't forget about these cases where vehicles and people are both missing. Lola Fry, Harry Milligan, Audrey Herron, Donald Irwin, and there are a few more in Unfound's catalog. Well, with Beau Mann, he would not have been using Uber that day had he been able to open his garage door. Instead, Beau used the service and took a ride to somewhere. And now for a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Linus' website, charleyproject.org. Beau Michael Mann started life in Massachusetts, but that small state couldn't hold him. Beau lived in Texas. He went to New York City. Beau loved the hustle and bustle of all of it. Along the way, he had a variety of jobs, including working at a furniture store picking out the art that would complement whatever customers bought. Yet along the way, Beau developed a drug addiction that eventually put him in the Passages Rehab Facility in Malibu, California. He recovered, and through that, Beau turned a negative into a positive by creating a now popular app, Sober Grid, for recovering addicts where they can go to seek support and help. So on November 30th, 2021, just after 2 p.m., Beau got into an Uber at 11,000 Ventura Boulevard in Los Angeles, seemingly headed for his home address in Santa Monica, about 25 minutes away. However, shortly after, Beau changed the destination to a house right across the street from his gym, but still in the Santa Monica area. Then only minutes after that, the Los Angeles 911 system received a text from Beau's phone, although the message did not seem to be urgent. The 911 operator texted back, but there was no response from Beau. He was never seen again. When tracked down weeks later, the Uber driver claimed he dropped Beau off and there were no problems. Beau paid, and the driver seemingly knew nothing about the 911 text. Likewise, the resident at the Santa Monica address claimed she had never heard of Beau Mann. I'm not one to sensationalize things. You know that. But for an unsolved disappearance, especially one that is this recent, there are as many twists and turns as any case Unfound has ever presented. I want you to contemplate why that is, as you also try to answer these three questions during the interview. Number one, how do you analyze what Beau bought at the 7-Eleven that day? Number two, was the 911 text truly a request for help? And number three, if Joe Good is telling the truth and that she has no idea who Beau Mann is, then was her address really picked out randomly by Beau? Beau's family and friends are convinced foul play occurred, although they are not sure who the suspect is. The guest for this episode is Beau's mother, Amy Mann. Unfound news. The business cards are in, and they are spectacular. You can see pictures of the front and back on Facebook, Instagram, and Unfound's website, theunfoundpodcast.com. Next, tonight, February 17th, 2023, Dateline is showing its own coverage of the conviction of Steve Pankey. They wanted to use a snippet of the interview I did with him. I said no. I asked to be interviewed for the show. They said no. Finally, within the next month, I think Unfound will be covering its first disappearance, into which we'll be trying to figure out what happened to a violent fugitive who escaped a mental health facility and the woman he took with him. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the mother of Beau Mann, Amy Mann. Amy, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, the listeners should know that this is the first disappearance that we've covered that was originally an Unfound Now episode that was on YouTube back in January of 2022, so about a year ago. This is the first one that has now become an actual episode for the podcast, and maybe it's a fitting one given that all of the things that we're going to get into with Beau's disappearance that, as I've discovered, is way more complex than when I talked about his disappearance a year ago. So, Amy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's as we usually do when we have mothers of missing children on the podcast. Let's just talk about your family in general. Of course, Beau is your son. Do you have any other children? How many? Where is Beau in that line? Maybe just describe the Beau or the Mann family coming out of Massachusetts.
Okay. Well, my husband and I are now empty nesters. We have 3 children, all grown. The oldest is Ben, and he's 42. 40, could be 43. Beau will be 41 on the 21st of February. He's the middle child. So I had 2 boys and a girl, and the baby is a girl. Her name is Brandy, and she's 38.
Wow, very close together. 43 is the going to be the oldest, and then 38 is the youngest.
Yeah. I had 3 kids within like 5 years. Bing, bang, boom.
Okay, all right. Very much like my 2 brothers and my sister who were born very close together, and then I came along like 20 years later. But
wow.
yes, that's true. All of them starting with the letter B. Why is that?
Well, my name at the time, my last name was Britnell, which is their biological father. And I don't know why I thought the rhyming of the B's would be cool. I was young and thought it would be cool. So I named Ben after my grandfather. Beau was named after Beau Bridges, the actor.
Good
and
choice.
Brandy was named after the song Brandy. Remember that song Brandy in the 70s?
Yes, she's a fine girl.
Yeah.
What a fine girl she'd be. Yes, I know that song.
Yeah.
Yes, and if I was
Yeah.
really sharp, I could name who the artist was. Okay, so
Looking
they're
Glass.
Looking Glass. Look at you. Okay. So they originally had last names that started with B then.
Yes, and
Uh,
and my husband and I, my first husband and I divorced. Well, I left him in January of '87. I moved up here in August of '89 to start a relationship with David. Soon
mhm.
after, Beau wanted David to adopt him, but the other two just they didn't. I mean, while David was, their dad as far
Yeah.
as doing everything with them like a father would, um, they just didn't want to disrespect their bio dad, and so they kept his name.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Bo took the last name Man, but your other two children have the original last name then.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for explaining that. Okay. And how all three of them get along? Of course, Bo's in the middle. Was he your traditional kind of middle child, or how would you explain all three of them together?
Oh, they were well. I mean, I was very lucky. I was very lucky. I had very mannerly kids, very polite, and people used to compliment them all the time. They were always very close, the three of them, most especially Beau and Brandy. They're very close. It's almost like she could, always sense something from the East Coast to the West Coast if she couldn't talk to him, which she did, every couple of days.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, they were very close.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to just Bo himself, since he is the topic of our episode today. Maybe some of the unique things about him. Did he have a little bit of a different personality compared to your other children? Did he stick out another way compared to the others, or maybe interests, hobbies, all those things?
Well, he is the kindest person, the kindest soul on the planet. He would do anything for anybody. Very funny, has a very good sense of humor, as does his other siblings. Ben actually is the joker in the family.
Hmm.
Likes to prank people. Um, but yeah, Beau was always just very loving, very kind. He had tons of friends. I mean, there's not anybody who didn't like him. You just couldn't not like him. He was very likable
Hmm. Okay.
and
What were some of
honest and
well,
hardworking. And
yeah. What were some of his interests, hobbies, as maybe as a teenager? What was he into?
the teenager, oh, you're making me think back. Um, he was always interested in and wanted to go to business school. I can
Really?
remember him, wanting to play the stock market when he was, I don't know, like 10 or something. And I'm like, what are you going to play it with? I mean, who's going to, back then you didn't have all this online stuff.
Right, right.
Just always had a good, head on his shoulders, really, really smart as far as business goes. He kind of, um, was just a natural, right? So
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember what his interests were when he was a kid.
How about
Um,
did he play any sports? Was he into music, play any instruments? Maybe back at that
uh,
time, given his age, maybe like Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. Any of that stuff.
oh yeah, they used to play Nintendo. We had the
Okay.
Nintendo with all the games and everything, and the
Yeah,
kids were
yeah.
always fighting over who had Nintendo time.
Yes.
This is a while back. Um, he was in like school. I'm trying to think what it's called.
Hmm.
Not class president. What am I trying to say?
Student council?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, you're
Yeah.
welcome.
Student
Okay.
council and all that stuff. But
Hmm.
he was not very challenged, I would say, in public
Hmm.
school. He
Yeah.
just was, he was, as a matter of fact, I ran into one of his friends the other day, and she was talking about how she remembers very vividly Beau in Spanish class arguing with the teacher on a correct pronunciation of a word in Spanish, and he just was not going to back down. He was arguing with the teacher that he knew better than the teacher
Uh-huh.
did.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, he was he was a good kid. He really was a
Hmm.
good kid.
Okay, so I
Um,
guess being that you're from Massachusetts, I guess in Boston lingo, he was wicked smart.
Wicked smart. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Okay, right. Okay. Okay. And just so we could get this out of the way right now, Beau was gay or is gay,
Yeah.
and how did he reveal that to you? Was that very early on, like teenage years, or into his 20s?
Yeah.
When did
Yeah.
that come
No,
up?
it was in his teenage years. And he came in my bedroom to talk to me one night. And I really hadn't seen it coming. So I didn't really
Mm,
know. I don't remember how I responded, but of course I believe, and I know that, God wants us to just love them,
sure.
not to
Yeah.
judge. And
Yeah.
so I've always loved him,
Yeah.
you
Of
know.
course. Of course. Did he let other people know, or was it just kind of a family thing, or did he, if he was in, if he was in high school, obviously, that can be something. There cannot be a lot of, hatred, from certain people, certain groups regarding something like that. Did he face
Yeah.
any of that, or was that just like a family thing at the time while he lived at home?
Just, I mean, we knew, but I don't think that he advertised it per se. I don't think he
Hmm.
actually came out until he was, like in his 20s. I don't
Okay.
remember the date, but
Okay.
it's been a while.
Okay. Very good. What about his education? We mentioned high school. Did he go to college?
He went to
Uh,
junior college. Yeah, he went to junior college, and then later he took a lot of classes at Harvard Business School. You know how you can,
wow.
yeah, um,
Wow.
yeah. He was pretty brilliant.
Okay.
Pretty
All
brilliant.
right. And how long, what age would you say he was at while going to Harvard for these classes? And
This
what
was
about work? What
later
was he?
on. No, this was later on, like in his
Uh,
30s. Yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah. He
Okay.
didn't go. He didn't go early on.
Okay. What about work? What was he doing for money during this time? Maybe first jobs going into his 20s. What was he doing to have some pocket change?
Yeah. Well, um, he actually. Let me see. I mean, I'm looking for something. One of his friends had
Hmm.
written that talked about oh, there it is, what he had done. He has a friend in Houston. She was a judge, um, Abigail, and she pretty much had written down that, let me find it. He had an he had opened an art get well, he went to work for Lewis Shanks in Houston, which has three locations: Houston, Austin, and San Antonio. And he started off just working for the art department. I don't remember exactly what he was doing, but he ended up taking over and running all three art galleries. So he was running between Houston and San Antonio and Austin all the time.
Huh.
And then he wanted to go to New York City. He loves the city. I mean, the
Mhm.
fact that he lived in Boston for years,
Okay.
twice actually, two different times. He's a city boy, whereas I'm more of a country girl. But anyway,
Mhm.
I don't know where he got that. He just likes city living.
Okay. So Lewis Shanks is an art dealer or something like that in Texas. I've not
Louis
ever
Shanks is
heard
a
of it.
furniture store. No, it's a
Oh,
furniture store. And back
oh,
in the day, back in the early 2000s, they actually had uh, an art gallery within the furniture store. So people were in there buying furniture. They could thus go into the art gallery, and I forgot the name of it. I think I still have his business card from it, but I don't have it in front of me now. But people would come in there to buy art that would match. And so there was a designer that would work, and the designer and Beau would help them pick out what
mm,
art would go with the furniture that they were buying.
interesting.
So
Okay.
I don't know how high end of a store that Lewis Shanks is, but he did that for many years.
Okay. All right. So what, just approximately, what years would you say that was? Just approximately.
2010, 99, I'm sorry, 2009, 2010, maybe until, when did he come back up here? 13. So I guess
Okay.
4 years, something like that.
Okay. And then you said he wanted to go to New York City too. Did he end up going there? Did he end up living there or doing anything?
I'm trying to remember. He had lived in New York before he went to Houston.
Hmm.
he had he had an apartment across the street from where they filmed Sex and the City. So that was kind of cool. I could
Okay.
say, yeah, my town is across from where they film it. But I'm bad with dates. I'd have to go back and find
Okay.
the
So
dates.
that's fine. All right. That's fine. So
Yeah,
he
so
was down there
we
in
love New
Houston for
York.
the, yeah, so he was down there in Houston for those years, but he comes back to Massachusetts
Yes, he came back
for
here to
what reason?
Massachusetts. I don't really recall, but he
Okay.
stayed with us for a couple of months, and
Mhm.
then he met someone, and he was already working on the app at the time. I mean,
Oh,
I
okay.
remember him being in my dining room talking to these developers over in India because he had the idea about it, you know, um,
Hmm.
and you know, trying just to get an app off the ground is kind of hard work, and you need
Sure.
investors and you need backers and you need a whole lot more than just him trying to get an app with these little Indian guys over in India. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Silver Grip meant so much to him. He just really was passionate about helping people, and he put his whole heart and his whole soul and his whole body into it because he believed that substance abuse disorder, is something that so many millions of families deal with.
Sure.
And, you know, he just felt like it was a great tool. So he
Right.
had so many, he has so many visions and plans for it. Um, that
Mhm.
there are several of them out there now, but when he
Yeah.
first did it, he was the only one, and it was like the premier sober app, and now there's many out there. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's called Sober Grid, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit later, more in depth. So he's working on that.
okay.
But on that topic, of course, Beau himself, being that he started this, is because he had first-hand experience with addiction. As best you can tell, when did it start? How did it start? And even went the whole way to California to get treatment. What can you say about all of that?
Well, that portion was when he was in his late teenage years. Um, so it, I mean, he had started smoking pot as a teenager in high school to be cool, like all your friends are or whatever. And he actually had a counselor at the time who had set up for him to go out there. Yeah, whether the guy had a financial interest in it or who knows, but I thought, why not trust a professional? So he went out there. I want to say 96 maybe.
Okay.
Well, he was definitely in his teenage years still.
Okay.
But I mean, I had no idea that it was such a high-end recovery place or whatever, but I do believe you get what you pay for in a lot of instances. And not to say that lesser expensive ones couldn't have been just as effective. And I've heard a lot of bad things about some of the bottom dollar ones. So I don't know.
Mhm.
It was just what we thought was best at the time. So we sent him.
Okay. And it was called Passages, and in fact, it's still around. It still exists here
Yeah.
in 2023, over 20 years later. So must be doing something right.
Right.
And we're going to remember Passages for a little bit later because there is a kind of a coincidence that comes into all of this. But did that help?
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He had
But
a he had
unfortunately, it was not the end though of his addiction, was it? I mean, going back to the 90s, he still struggled with that into the 2000s, into the 2010s, or what?
oh, he was clean for well over 10 years, you know. Um
Hmm.
yeah. Yeah. I wish I would have kept a diary so I knew exact dates and whatnot. But
That's
yeah.
fine. We're just trying to get a good feel for him because addiction does come into this disappearance. I'm not saying that he was, struggling with it at the time of his disappearance, but certainly some of the people we're going to talk about in what he was doing at the time, it's certainly a big topic for this. So he
Hmm.
goes to California in his teen years, and of course, that we know later, he goes to Texas to work, and then he comes back to Massachusetts. He's with you. I just have to ask, when he came back to live with you for a few months, was there any indications that he was having any problems with addiction, anything like that at the time?
No, he was focused on trying to get Sober Grid off the ground.
Okay.
And It was like 2013, 2014. I think 2014 is the actual established date for Sober Grid. So 2013, he was here, he was working on it. Then he actually, found people to help him as co-founders, people who knew how to finance and get things off the ground.
Mhm.
So, basically what he wanted to begin with was just, a sober community that would be accessed anywhere, anytime. You could
Yeah.
just get on an app, kind of like Facebook. And, if let's say you're traveling and, your normal support group is in Boston and you have to go on a business trip to San Francisco, you don't know where to go to get, if you want to go meet up with some sober people and have coffee or whatever. But the app would enable you to be able to find people close to where you were, right? And
Mhm.
so you would have a community, but it's pretty much a platform of all kinds of tools to help people help anyone find and maintain their path to sobriety while avoiding the traditional barriers to accessing support, which is, as I just mentioned, let's say you're traveling and
Yeah.
you don't know where there's an AA meeting and what church basement where, or you know,
Right.
so that would kind of break down the barrier of that. So,
Okay.
but and that's what happened. He was out of town and he couldn't find an AA meeting to attend, so he said to himself, there's got to be like a Facebook type of app to connect people who are all in recovery and they want to have support close by. So that's when he started talking to he started talking to people, and they would refer him to this or that, and then he was speaking with app devs, they call them, application developers, in India, to try to get the app built. But then later he essentially had two co-founders who actually helped him get it off the ground. I
Okay.
mean, and it's pretty successful. It's in like 170 countries, and it's
Wow.
helped hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know what the actual number is,
Mhm.
but there is an active community that's on there that you know tend to reach out to one another and help each other out whenever they're struggling with their addiction.
All right. So just so we're understanding, he has, of course, been missing since end of November of 2021, but the app exists, and if people were to go to like the Google store or something, they would find it there.
Absolutely. But
Okay.
it's not just an app. We also
Mm,
provide coaching. There's
okay.
like a crisis hotline. There's a 800
Wow.
number. You can purchase coaching sessions with people who are certified. It's almost like, dial a sponsor, if you will. And that's my words, not Sobergood's words, but,
Okay.
you know, people can, you can actually buy up to do the coaching piece. Beau bought a company called Ascent out of Ohio several years ago to bring it into the family of Sober Grid, and so it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Sober Grid.
Okay. All right. And we're going to once again come back to that a little bit more later. Let's talk
Okay.
about this boyfriend that he had at the time of his disappearance. My understanding is his name is Jason. We don't have to get into his last name or anything, but we know this disappearance happened in California, but Jason was not there. How did the two meet? Where was Jason living at the time? How long were they together? What can you say? What do you know about that?
Well, I don't really care to speak a lot about Jason, but I can at least tell you that I know that they met online in 2017.
Okay.
Um, and I know that he went with his siblings. They all flew to Texas on Thanksgiving Day of 21, and they met with the biological father, his wife, um, lots of friends and family that are still in Texas. So when he got there, he told his brother and sister that he had broken it off with Jason. So,
Oh.
but even before he flew to Texas, he spent the month of October with us. And I mean, this is really just a mute point. It doesn't really matter. But I mean, this is what I know for fact. He
Yeah.
told each one of the family members that he didn't think Jason was right. Oh, and a family friend that he grew up with and he went to high school with, they went to dinner one night and he was telling them, I don't think I want to get married. I don't, I just don't, this is not what I want. So, but he had told each of us separately that he was going to break it off, and he just didn't want, That was it. And so I know what my son told me. I know what he told his dad and his sister and his brother and his friend.
Mhm.
So I believe it that he went to Texas and told the siblings, yes, I broke it off.
Okay, so what we're
So
understanding then is at the time of his disappearance, your interpretation that Jason and Beau were ending their relationship.
correct.
Okay, but Jason was not in California. Where did Jason live?
He lives in Michigan.
Michigan. Okay. That's all we need to establish there because that may come up later. Okay. When did Beau move to LA? We already talked about how as a teenager he went out to California for rehab, but how long had he been living in having this place on Barrington Street or Avenue in LA before he went missing? How long had he been living there?
I know he was there during the pandemic. So 3 or 4 years for sure.
Okay.
Um, I actually had dug up some information to try to tell me that, but now I can put my hands on it. But yeah, it was
Okay.
3 or 4 years, I think.
Okay. So he wasn't a newbie to the Santa Monica, Studio City, Los Angeles area at the
No, he
time of his
loved California. I mean,
did
you
he?
know, he's like his mom. I mean, we live in Massachusetts, but he always hated the cold, and he always liked California. He liked the warm weather.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he liked, he had friends out there. He had a really good support recovery group.
Mm-hmm. And Los
And
Angeles also might be a better place to be for his app Sober Grid or everything attached to Sober Grid, being that it's the second largest city in the United States. It's a good place to market. Maybe of course a lot of people have money in LA. Maybe can help them do some other things with Sober Grid, etc. That's a good place to be.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he didn't really talk about it from a business sense, although I will
Mhm.
say, he would drive us all crazy. I mean, we love him to death, but he
Mhm.
ate, slept, sober grid was all he would talk about. And
Mhm.
bless his heart, we were like, okay, enough, but let's talk about something else. What's going on with, XYZ or
Mhm.
something. But he just, you know, he he lived and breathed sober grid. That was his baby. That was his life.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
you ask about hobbies and interests, work, 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 and work is what he
Right.
did.
I know the feeling doing Unfound. I feel the same way. I talk about it a lot with the people who are around me as well. So I know the feeling. Okay, I gotcha. It's a 24/7 thing for sure. And what he
Mhm.
was doing and what I'm doing here, I know the feeling. All right, so he's living down there. And any issues, once again, looking back at it now, those 3 to 4 years before he went missing, anything that really popped up, any problems he was having down there, anything like that that ever got back to your ears?
No, I mean he. No, I mean I know he really liked the group of guys that he was with. His sober group that he was with. He really enjoyed them. He had a great relationship with his sponsor out there. Um,
Hmm.
I I don't know any, friend. Well, I do know one friend that he had, someone who lived here in Massachusetts that lived out there, and so they would hang out sometimes. Um, but I mean, he's a grown man. I'm not going to
Yeah,
question him every
right.
single. You know what I mean? That's
No,
all.
I
That's
know.
what a mom
All I'm
does.
asking is, did he ever complain about anything,
No.
fears, anything like that? It's a big city, even though you have friends. I live here in Tampa, I'm just asking. Of course, he's the one that's
Yeah.
missing, so
No.
I have
He
to ask.
he never he never expressed any fears. I mean, just uncertainty about like his life in general because his work was very stressful.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, because it meant so much to him and he wanted to see it succeed. And I would say no fear unless maybe he possibly had a fear of something, of it failing or something.
Yeah,
He didn't
sure.
express that to me at all. But
Okay.
no, he didn't talk about fear at all. Just he was very stressed out and he was kind of uncertain about everything, so to
Okay.
speak.
Right. All right. So,
But he
of
didn't have any
course.
beefs with anyone. He was a teddy bear.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Right. And
he
Sober
got
Grid,
what?
it's like a tech startup. You're
Yeah.
starting up, and we hear about all the ones that make it, like coincidentally Uber and Lyft, or even going back to the Facebook days, the tech startups. We hear about the
Oh yeah.
ones that make it. We don't hear about all the ones that don't. These ones that
Yeah.
we hear about are like the exceptions. It's very difficult. You need a lot of luck. So I can understand what he was doing was very speculative. Great idea. Nobody can argue with that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be successful. But on that note, had Sober Grid gotten to the point where he was living in LA, and was he making money off of Sober Grid, or did he have to like take some jobs on the side, or what was his money
No,
situation in LA?
no, he when somebody had asked me earlier on, I mean, I know when Sober Good first started, he didn't take a salary for the longest time because he was trying to get it off the ground. But yes, at the time he was living out there, he was drawing a salary.
He was.
And
Wow.
yeah, um, I think his rent was like 1,600 a month, which is pretty comparable to here in Massachusetts. So it wasn't
Yeah,
outrageous.
that's pretty low in LA terms. That's
What I hear.
That's fair. That's fairly low in LA terms. All right. So he got in Sober Grid. You said it started in about 2013. So 8 years in, he was able to make money. And if I'm not asking you to be a tech expert, but how would you make money from something like that? Was there like advertising that was like inside the app, or people paying for things? Is this an app you have to buy? How was he making
They
money off that?
tried that model. I mean, at first they tried the model about paying for an upcharge to be on the app.
Mhm.
But then they dropped it. It didn't seem like it was all that lucrative. And then they tried for advertising, which is how Facebook does it, it's by advertising.
Right.
And that wasn't, I don't believe, making a ton of money. But the best thing is the coaching aspect,
Okay.
because especially with the, and I'm going to mess this word up, opioid.
Opioid. Yes.
The government's throwing money at all these states to help people to obtain recovery and stay in recovery, and coaching is one of those avenues.
Okay. All right. And I can.
Yeah, that's just the best of my understanding of how it
Okay.
goes.
Very good. All right. So he's
It's
living
not.
down there. He's not taking. Doesn't have to take any side gigs, as a lot of people do when they're starting up something like that. Even though it's been 8 years in, no. I guess in LA terms, startup actors, doing waitressing or something like that. This is what he was doing. He was making front money from it, and maybe was just trying to keep his expenses low. Okay. And one more thing about before we get into what the part of the outline is called additional questions. But who is Blake Brown? Who is he?
Okay, so I believe he met him online, but he had told Brandy when he was with her at Thanksgiving, he flashed the picture of him to Brandy and said, "What do you think about this guy? I think I'm going to meet up, with this guy when I get back to California." And Brandy said, "Well, I don't think it's a good idea, So, she just thought he looked like a sketchy character. She said, "No, I don't think it's a good idea."
All right. And so, for example, Beau never spoke to you about Blake. He's not, of course, he's not
No,
nothing. Okay. So you did not know about Blake Brown until after Beau went missing.
correct.
Okay. All right. So they met online, and it sounds to me like Beau was maybe thinking about, being that he was seemingly breaking up with Jason, this might be somebody new in his life, somebody special in his life.
Yeah, yeah, I guess. Yeah,
Okay.
it's my understanding.
Okay. We've kind of already covered this, but just in general, at the end of November 2021, how are you feeling? As much as you knew about your son's life, Beau's life, how are you feeling about what he was doing? Very positive. You talking to him on the phone. How were you feeling about what he was doing and how his life was going?
Well, the family always tried to get him to move back up here, but he hated the cold, which I understand. When he was here in October, as I said earlier, he seemed very stressed, with a lot of work stress, but Sober Grid meant the world to him. And anybody knows, if you're trying to raise money and you're trying to run a business and you're dictating the developers to do this or that. And, it's just huge, And so the fact that he was so stressed worried me as a mom, because I wanted him to just not have all that stress in his life. But I mean, of course, we can't go without stress. But
Yeah, if you're trying to do anything new and difficult, stress is just part of the territory, I guess.
yeah,
I know that feeling myself. How often, maybe I should ask you this, how often did you usually speak to him? Every day, every other day, like on the phone or texting? How often would you say your communication
couple
was?
times, couple times a week. Um,
Okay.
and with Brandy, it was, there was never more than 2 or 3 days that he didn't talk to his sister, because they were very close.
Okay.
But with me and Dad, it was less often. It was, once or
Okay.
twice a week, sometimes just once a week, sometimes twice a week, depending on. He was always calling us from a Starbucks while he's in line waiting to order.
That sounds like me and my dad. He calls me and I'll usually be sitting at a Starbucks doing unfound work. That happens quite
Yeah,
often, so I know that feeling. Okay. Brandy
yeah.
though did not live in California. Where does she live, if you can say?
Here in Massachusetts.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned this trip to Texas. This was for Thanksgiving, or was this for something else? Was this like
No, just for
pre-planned?
Thanksgiving.
It
Yeah,
was.
no,
Okay.
his sister wanted to go out there and thought it'd be good if they all three went. And
Mhm.
so they booked a house in
Mhm.
Lubbock. You can do those, whatever it's called, the renting house thing.
Airbnb.
That's
Airbnb.
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they rented the house for Thursday through Monday. And they got
Mhm.
to see, childhood friends, family. They just got to see a lot of people there.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, both Ben and Brandy have told me what a wonderful time that they had, that it was the best trip ever, is how they put it. And
Wow.
even, the last time they talked was that Monday night, the 29th at 10:30 p.m. was the last time that he talked to his siblings, because they both had parted ways earlier in the day. And, then
Mhm.
Beau made it back to California and they got stuck in a snowstorm. But anyway, they talked at 10:30 and they, just said, "Hey, what a great time we had." So that was nice for them. But I mean,
Okay.
but after that 10:30 p.m. phone call, it was radio silent. We never heard from him again.
Right, and we're going to get into that in a moment. If Brandy could remember, for example, Brandy, I realize other people were there, but just Brandy as an example, did she remember after Beau went missing? Did she remember Beau saying, "I have some plans for the next day or plans for later that week"? Anything like that that came up? Obviously, brought up this Blake Brown person, but anything
That
other
was
than that, other people he was going to meet later in the week.
no. She said he had just showed her his picture and said, "Hey, I'm gonna meet this guy when I get back to California. What do you think?" And she's like, "Nah, he's got tattoos all over. He's kind of sketchy. I don't like him. Don't go meet him." Was his
Okay.
sisterly advice, her sisterly advice to him, but nothing definitive about
Okay.
going somewhere else or anything else.
All right. Very good. Thank you. All right, let's now move up to what is at least a year and some months into this disappearance, the accepted disappearance date of November 30th, 2021. It is a Tuesday, so it had been like 5 days after Thanksgiving of 2021. And we're going to, for the audience, we're going to kind of do this backwards. We're going to kind of do this in the way that Amy herself experienced it back at the time. We could easily do it, revealing everything up front. But I think it's important for all of you to hear how Amy found out about certain things as they happened. For you, Amy, do you remember that day specifically for you yourself in your life, November 30th, 2021? Was it a day like any other? I really don't. I kind of get an idea of what you do for work and everything, but do you remember that day specifically?
Well, just to back up onto Thanksgiving, my husband and I drove 2.5 hours north to where my 87-year-old father-in-law lives, and we spent Thanksgiving with him.
Hmm.
And as Beau always did every holiday, he called and said Happy Thanksgiving, and he wanted to talk to his grandpa. And so, I talked to him on Thanksgiving Day, and then I talked to him a couple more times while he was in Texas. But I didn't find out he was missing on Wednesday, and I don't have a calendar in front of me. That
And
would have
that is
been
December 1st.
December 1st. Yeah, thank
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
Because okay, so she talked to him Monday night at 10:30 p.m.
Okay.
Then she texted him maybe on Tuesday. Wednesday, she couldn't get a hold of him. So she called his assistant and asked if she had heard from him. And she said no, but she would go to his apartment slash office the next day. And that would be Thursday, the second then. And
Okay.
she got there and there was no sign of him. So that's when things started to get kind of chaotic for all of us.
Of
So,
course.
yeah. So Thursday, I called the LAPD, who then transferred me to Beverly Hills because I was so freaked out and upset when I looked at my iPhone. I used his P.O. box number in place of his street location. And so they transferred me to Beverly Hills, and Beverly Hills opened the case. And then in the meantime, Brandy had also called to open up. Well, she called Beverly Hills directly to open it up. So she opened up a second ticket or case. So they closed mine. So it was just a lot of chaos at the time.
Of course. Very common.
But whenever his assistant went there and noticed that he wasn't there, she did leave a note on the door to say, "Hey, call your sister when you see this note." That was on Thursday. And so, we both called the police. I opened a missing persons case. She opened a missing persons case.
Mhm.
Then they ended up just merging them. But they did let us know once we got the address thing straightened out that what I gave them was a P.O. box number at a mailbox, which is what he used for the company. And so then they said, "Hey, we'll take the case for right now. We'll see how much good we can do, because when it goes to LAPD, it's just going to get under the bottom of a big pile, and
Right.
you're not going to get any help." And
Right.
so,
Right.
so, yeah. So, once we had the address correction, we had a detective who was retiring in 2 weeks and moving to Florida. So there
Okay.
wasn't a lot he was going to do anyway either. But he was able to get into Beau's credit card, and that's how he found out about the Uber. So that's one
Okay.
thing he did before he
All right.
retired.
All right. We're going to get into that in a moment. The Uber plays being that we just talked about tech startups with Sober Grade, it's kind of weird that we're also going to be talking about Uber and the technicalities of all of this, because this has been a tech startup that has taken over the United States, if not the world, over like the last 10 years, along with Lyft, of course, as well
Right.
as a competitor. Okay. Regarding this assistant, once again, if you don't know, that's fine, but I have to ask, when this person went over to his place, was she able to go inside? Did she have a key? Did she go in? Did she look
Oh yeah.
around,
No,
or
it
what?
was a digital keypad, so she
Oh,
knew how to get in.
okay.
There's a running joke in our family: Beau Michael loses everything. There's
Hmm.
not a day, and I'm almost as bad, but there's not a day that child doesn't lose his car keys or his wallet or a key to his apartment or something. So
Hmm.
they put in a keypad, so he wouldn't forget the number and he could get into his apartment.
Hmm.
But we always joked about him being, the absent-minded professor, like, so brilliant, but very forgetful about things.
Okay. All right. So she knew what the number was. She
Yeah,
goes
she
in there,
got
she
in.
punts it in,
Yep.
and she goes in there, and of course Beau's not there. But to your knowledge, at least at the time, and we're going to talk about how some of you did go out there and do things. Um, Nothing unusual, nothing like for example, any signs of violence, anything stolen like a TV or anything like that at all.
No, just messy apartment, dish full of dirty dish. I mean, a sink full of dirty dishes,
Hmm.
Dr. Pepper cans everywhere because that was his drink of choice, is Dr. Pepper.
Okay.
Just typical sloppiness, but nothing missing. No TV, no, nothing missing.
Okay, very good. So regarding the police, when it comes to filling out a report, this is just something that was done over the phone. They're asking you questions. Here's Beau Mann. Here's his description. This is the address. This is when we last talked to
Mhm.
him. Things like that.
Right. And
Okay.
they didn't officially hand it off to the LAPD until December 16th, and we'd already been out there and came back.
Okay. Well, let's move.
Uh,
Thank you for bringing that up, because as you can see, that's the outline next. You did, of course. We're going to call this the rest of this your own investigation, because there's so much, and anybody who is interested in seeing how what we would call quote unquote regular people can get information and do things. This is exactly what we're talking about when I've talked about this before. Who went out to LA and who decided where you're even going to start with this? How many people went out and what'd you do?
Myself, Brandy, Benjamin, my oldest son, and a friend here from Massachusetts. And then Beau's and Brandy's friend, Judge Abigail from Houston, hopped on a plane and met us there too.
Wow.
So we had 5 of us out there. And so, figuring out where to start, we went to the apartment and we met with his longtime sponsor who lived out there, Guy. And then we went to meet with this Kevin Berger at the Beverly Hills Police Department. And we had his assistant print up posters. And so we went around hanging posters and putting them everywhere that we could find to stick a poster up. I'm sure they probably got blown away within the week, but we went to the 7-Eleven and we cajoled and begged the manager to let us look at the footage of the surveillance video. It took me a few minutes because when I saw him on camera, I was so excited because I could see him live walking around inside 7-Eleven. It took me a few minutes to get my brain cells working to take out my cell phone and snap pictures. And I wish, looking back, I would have asked for the actual footage. But anyway, so in the meantime, while we're out there, my husband's talking to 2 different private investigators that we had been told, were good at what they do. And he was not very optimistic that he could do anything much more than what we were doing.
Right.
And he said, I can put guys out on the street at $400 an hour to go scour for him. But, we're talking, I could spend $30,000 a week. He said, not that I don't want to, I don't want to take your money.
Yep.
I don't want to take advantage of your family in a time of need like this, but what you're doing is the exact same thing that I would do.
Right.
So, we ended up later getting hooked up with somebody called, We Help the Missing, and they had a PI, but they didn't do anything. And then we had somebody else who jumped in and they were going to help, but they were we were doing more than they were.
Okay.
And
let me ask you this. Yeah. So we know that this Tuesday, November 30th, 2021 was a Tuesday. Start filling out this paperwork, calling it in on December 2nd. When did everybody arrive in LA? What date was it?
We flew out on Wednesday the 8th.
Okay. So it's already a week later. And how long did you stay?
Till that Sunday the 12th.
Okay. All right. So 4 days. Okay. So, and of course you're out there. Maybe most of you have never even been to LA before, don't know your way around, but you're just trying to do the best you can. All right, so you're starting in on this. You've already mentioned the 7-Eleven. We're going to come back to that in a second. When did the idea of checking his Uber / Lyft, of course, we know they're separate companies, but they're kind of combined here. When did it occur to even look at that? How did you get access to that? Because it plays a huge role in this disappearance. Beau's account, how did you get into it and what did you see?
Okay, well, first of all, my husband and several other people have remarked that of the video we have of him leaving his apartment at 11:20 a.m. on the 30th, he had this backpack, which was just jam-packed full. And he never really ever carried a backpack, that we ever saw. So why now? Was he planning a trip somewhere or something? Yeah. So we wanted to get into any possible credit card or anything like that to see if he had booked a flight, whatever. Yeah, but as far as so his assistant could look at his bank credit card charges, and she saw on 12/2, she saw a purchase at Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf and a Lyft charge, but they were dated 12/2. Mm-hmm. Well, think about it. Most bank charges do hit a day or two after, right? That's right. And so those charges ended up actually being on the 30th. Okay. At this point, we can't log into any of his Lyft, his Uber, his anything. All we have is a credit card with a date that is after the fact. Right. Okay. So once once we knew he had taken the Lyft, Detective Berger used both credit card number and social security number, and he called and found that there was an Uber ride for $44.86. So Berger said he would reach out to Uber, or we asked him to reach out to Uber. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we kept saying, can you ping the phone? Where's it? He told me that he pinged the phone in Boston. And I'm like, well, that's asinine. I
Hmm.
mean, he would have had to have gotten on a plane and flown to Boston, and there's no charge anywhere to say that he's in Boston, but you're telling me that his phone's pinging off of Boston. And so we never, and keep in mind, we met with him when we were in LA. We went to the Beverly Hills Police Department. We sat down in one of the interrogation rooms and we all talked to him. But he was getting on a plane that day to fly to California, Florida, where his family was already at because he was retiring and leaving in 2 weeks.
Hmm.
So he pretty much didn't do a whole lot, but at least he did this. I mean, this right here was a start for us that we didn't have.
Okay.
And so he found that out. But it wasn't until January the 10th,
Mm.
whenever we finally got the police officer, Jill Calhoun, we finally got her to admit that, she couldn't ping the phone anymore,
Mhm.
And I said, well, am I going to get in trouble if I go buy a new phone and have his stuff switched over? And she said, I really can't tell you what to do, but all I can tell you is I can't ping the phone anymore. It's useless. It's
Okay.
okay. So we went and got a new phone, and Alexis, who you talked to, she's an Apple genius.
Yeah.
She was able to take care of all that. So we were able to get into the phone then and look at the Uber app and look at the Lyft app and look at his emails, which is how we found this, about the credit card being logged in. I mean the
All
bank
right.
card.
Okay, we're gonna get to that, but just on Uber alone, just on Uber alone, what did when you did finally get into these access, getting a new phone, and people know how that works. When you go to get a new phone, they can switch all the apps over from an old phone to a new phone, and I'm
Yeah.
guessing this is how this all worked. But what were the locations logged for November 30th of 2021 for once again it was a combination of using Uber and Lyft. What were those locations?
He had left after he went to Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and I'm looking because I have a timeline on.
Go ahead. Please read from it. That's totally fine.
Darlington Avenue is between his apartment and the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and so he got into a Lyft
Okay.
at 12:03, and he was dropped off at 601 Kohler Street, and that's 12:29, and then 6 minutes later, he had requested another Uber, but it was canceled. Then at 12:44, which is about 15 minutes later now, he
Okay.
calls for a Lyft, and he gets in the Lyft, and they take him to Vineland Avenue in North Hollywood.
And then from there, where did he go next?
Well, so far between being dropped off at the first place, it's about 15 minutes that we don't have any proof or knowledge of him
Mm-hmm.
doing anything
Right.
except getting back into a car and leaving, and we don't know why he was there. We don't know
Okay.
anything. But over on this Vineland Avenue, 15 minutes from the Lyft drop off until he got into the Uber. It's at 5806 Craner. It's a 5-minute walk from Praia Massage Parlor, which we had tied that to him because of a Venmo charge that he had gotten a massage.
Okay.
And one of our people on the ground spoke to the lady who actually,
Mm-hmm.
gave the massage. And like I said, Joe, one of the angels we had on the ground, they were so wonderful to help us as long as they did. He said she was very hard to understand. Her broken English, she said she didn't know Beau except to have provided services.
Okay.
And she didn't, nothing really stuck out or struck out with her of him, just somebody coming in for a massage. And it appears he was there for half an hour. Now, I
Okay.
do know, you can buy a massage for
Yeah, well,
half an hour.
all we're talking about is Uber right now. All I'm concerned about is we just want to stick to one thing at a time. Where did he go from? Where did he go from the massage parlor according to the Uber and Lyft? We'll get into these specific places a little later, but just specifically, where did he go after Craner Street? What's the next? That's the next location
The
on.
next location, 1338 Berkeley Street. And
Okay.
I was trying to find the email last night that Jill, the police officer, had told me that evidently Uber had told, somehow she got from Uber that his original, he was going home, but he changed the address to 1338 Berkeley.
Huh. Okay.
But
So, and
I
he,
couldn't put my hands on it, so I don't want to test to that, but that's what she had said.
okay.
So, but it's about a 30-minute drive
Okay.
without traffic, 2:30 in the afternoon. And
Mhm.
so Beau had him stop at a 7-Eleven.
Okay. And that's the video that you talked about earlier.
Right.
All right. And we'll
So
come
you could
back to that in a
see
second.
him.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll come back to that in a second. We're just trying to find his movements. We'll get into the specifics a little later. All our movements. So he's at the Coffee Bean. He goes to Kohler Street. He goes up to Craner Street. And like I said, we'll get to specific locations, a little later. But then the next Uber eventually was set to 1338 Berkeley Street. But your understanding is somewhere at some point he had actually first planned to go home, which was in the 900 block of Barrington Avenue or something like that.
922 Barrington. Yep.
All right, thank you. So, but then that got changed to 1338 Berkeley Street, and that is where the Uber information ends, correct?
That is correct. And we did not know that until we broke in the phone.
Right.
Police would not tell us that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right. And so, what time, according to Uber, if people want to doubt this, we'll get into the doubts and things later. But what does the Uber say the time that he was dropped off at Berkeley Street, if we're to believe that? What time was it?
2:35.
2:35. All right.
Time.
Okay. So I want everybody to remember that 2:35 p.m. on November 30th, 2021. Very good. Now, to your knowledge, once again, if you don't have any knowledge on this, totally fine. Had he ever got, according to the Uber records, whatever you could get, anybody has ever said, anybody who knew him, had he ever been to any of these locations before? Any proof of that?
No, Alexis and I looked, and he had
Mhm.
never been to any of these locations before.
Okay, very
They
good.
were not in his Lyft or Uber records.
Okay, let's now move on to this, which is also part of the Uber situation here. But during this final trip to 1338 Berkeley Street, if we're to believe that happened, a 911 text came from his phone. How was this discovered?
On 12/6, I had access to his cell phone account, so I could log in and I could see all the inbound and outbound calls. And the last thing that was on there posted was a 911. There was one outbound call to 911, and there were 2 incoming calls that were not completed back from 911.
Okay.
And then when we finally broke into the phone and could look at the app itself, we found a message about the fact he had used the 911 feature that Uber touts as being a secondary safety feature that they've implemented.
Okay, so our understanding then, as of doing this interview on February 6th of 2023, is that when this 911, this text to 911 happened, it was not just like me, there's my phone right here, just going regular onto my phone and just typing in 911 and writing whatever. This was actually done through the Uber app instead.
Well, I'm not sure I have the date, but 12/6, I knew the phone had called
Right.
911. We didn't know until we got into the app. We didn't even know the feature existed.
Yeah, I didn't
But
either.
when we got into the app and we saw a message, you have a message
Yeah.
saying something to the effect, and I could put my hands on it one day, but I literally have a box this big full of files. But anyway, the message from Uber said, we know you used our 911 feature. Were you satisfactory with the use? Something like that. Customer satisfaction kind of a thing,
Okay, so he did not dial 911 as we usually equate calling 911. He actually used it through an application. He opened that app and was in there.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
very good. Thank you. All right, how did the police, when you discovered all this about 911 and everything, what was your discussion with police about this? And I've seen the report. You sent it to me and I hope to be able to make this available. And we'll get into what actually the message says eventually. But how did the police react to this 911 at the time on November 30th and when you have spoken to them about it? How did they react?
They said that they were going to investigate. I'm looking, I'm trying to find where I had noted that, because it was not, we did 12/6, we still were with the Beverly Hills, and I did let Kevin Berger know, but he was in Florida, and he said, let me see when I get back into the office. The case may have already been transferred. So he wasn't really doing anything about the 911. But I know that Jill did, so I'm just trying to find. Okay. How did they react to this info? She said that she would investigate it. She would get a court order to get the records. And once she got them, she would then need to interpret them. I'm not sure what that means exactly. I have that note right here too. That she said it. I'm like, what does it mean to interpret records? I mean, how hard can that be? She said, I have to review the additional data. It has to be analyzed and put into a readable format. I will not be meeting with the Uber driver again. I've already interviewed him twice. And in my experience, it's not wise to go a third time. After the data is analyzed and it provides new information, I may do a third interview. Okay. And this is March. That's how long it took them to get the Lyft records and claim to be,
Okay, so I guess what we're saying is when you went to LA and spoke to the police originally, did they even know that a 911 text had come to them through the Uber app? Or was that something you had to discover on your own?
I found the email that I sent to Detective Berger on 12/6. I did it in the morning before I got on the plane. Okay. I remember it now because we flew out, in the afternoon, and I know on 12/6 I sent the 911 a screenshot of what the online record showed. I sent it to him. And I'm not remembering what he did, if anything. Like I said, he was just getting on a plane and going to Florida. So I don't know what he did with it, if anything.
All right. We'll come back to this when we talk about what the message specifically said. But we should state that this 911 text from Beau's phone came to, and of course it was through Uber, but it seems it was while he was in Uber going to the 1338 Berkeley Street address, correct?
Yep. And I have the data for that too. On. After 7-11. Okay, so we have the California Highway Patrol police report of a 911 call. That's a public knowledge. You can get it right.
And what time?
It's very confusing to read if you don't know what you're looking at. But the latitude and longitude was there. But it also said it was at LA 101 and US 101 West Laurel Canyon Boulevard with the cross street of Tujunga Avenue. And 219 was what the report had said.
Okay. So just so I can put this all together for everybody, you can take a break here for a second, Amy. So that day he goes to this Coffee Bean. He takes a ride service, so once again, it was a combination of both. It wasn't all Uber, it wasn't all Lyft that day. He goes from Coffee Bean, he takes a trip, and I'll be doing a map analysis by the way, for everybody regarding this on YouTube as well. He goes to Kohler Street, which is not really near the Coffee Bean. He then goes up to Craner Street, which is not really near Kohler. That's another trip. It's like a triangle now. And then the next address that's put into the Uber, this is now Uber, is to seemingly his home address, but then it changes to 1338 Berkeley Street. But in the meantime, I guess, has the driver stop at the 7-Eleven at 11,000 Ventura Boulevard. You can see the 7-Eleven; it's right there. And this is the video that Amy's talked about, where she sees Beau. He has this backpack, and we're going to get into what he buys and everything else. So this happens there at the 7-Eleven. Seemingly, he gets then back into the same Uber. I guess the driver's waiting outside. I don't think that's too unusual. Gets in the car. They start toward 1338 Berkeley Street, but well before seemingly this car gets to 1338 Berkeley Street, Beau sends a 911 message through the Uber app.
Yeah,
All right.
about 10 minutes later, I think, because we watched on the video, he walked out the door at 2:06 p.m. And
Mhm.
then 2:15 was the 911.
All right. So 9 minutes after
And
he is seen
according to
on.
the CHP records, they were up on the 101 freeway.
Right. And we just have to remember that we're talking about uh, different video systems and everything. So it might not be that the video at the 7-Eleven is absolutely correct. I'm going to believe that
Oh, yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
911 numbers or time is correct. But we, having worked for 7-Eleven way back in the day, those things could be off. But with computers today, maybe it was right on. So there's might be a little bit of wiggle room of a couple minutes, but not a lot. Let's just say 10 minutes into that drive after leaving the 7-Eleven, he
Mhm.
types in this message that we will get into later. Okay. But once again, this is well before this ride allegedly got to 1338 Berkeley Street. I'm going to keep saying that address so everybody knows it. Let's
Mhm.
move on to something else. We're going to get back to that in a moment. Of course, Beau just is not just missing everything he had with him in that day, his backpack. What about his phone records? You've talked about his phone records, but his phone that he had that day that he was texting with and everything is missing. What have you did you get those records? You have the Uber and Lyft records. Did you actually get his phone records of people he was calling and texting November like 28th, November 29th, November
Yep.
30th?
Yep.
Do you have those?
Yes. At the time, I was able to go in and download a couple of months worth of stuff. And Alexis and I started calling everybody that was on the list. We didn't know who they were. You know, some were friends, some were surprised to hear about it. Some, you know, just hung up on us. Don't know what that was all about, but
Okay.
um, we have since tried to go back in, and they have changed their online system, and most of those records have been wiped.
Wow.
So
You could
I
probably get
have his phone physically here, and it goes off all the time, but it's usually like a sales call or a junk call or something.
this is the new phone, not the
The
phone he
new
had that
phone,
day,
yeah,
but the new phone that was that you'd use to get it that Alexis, who I spoke to, used to get into the Uber and everything else.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I got you. All right. So we don't have his records for November 30th, is what you're saying. Or do you do?
No, I do have. I do
Okay.
have. I had dumped everything into an Excel file, made a list, and we started calling people. I
Okay.
would have to go back and pull
All
that
right.
out.
Your memory, the best of your memory, after the 911 call was made or text was made, are there any texts and calls from his phone after that?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay, very good. All right, I want everybody to remember that. Let's go back now. Let's just talk about in general all of these friends, this assistant you spoken about, maybe this anybody else who was helping him with Sober Grid. You talked about his mentor, and everything. Any of these people helpful at all? Any of them be able at the time when you went down there, or since anybody ever who knew him or seeing him maybe daily or at least a few times a week? Any of them helpful at all? Any insights into any of this?
Yeah. Uh, um, he had a very tight knit, like I said, sobriety group out there, and he had a
Mm-hmm.
sponsor that he'd had for several years, and they were very helpful to us. They suggested a couple of folks, that could, they would recommend that we could use and pay them, to canvass the area just as good as possible, hang flyers, talk to people, and they, so probably for 5 months we did that, and to the best of their ability, they canvassed everywhere, without leaving that general area and going to Orange County or going, someplace else in California. But we stopped the 1st of May because we felt we had covered all the bases and we just weren't getting anywhere. So, but during that time while they're out there doing the ground search, I'm back here in Massachusetts on the phone, faxing and emailing missing posters to all the hospitals and morgues, and I mean in all of Southern California, and calling every facility that I can find to give me any clues or help, because I've never had a missing person before in my life and I didn't
Of
know where to
course.
turn to or what to do.
Yeah.
So it was pretty chaotic in those days, as to who was doing what and what was going on. It was pretty busy.
I guess what I'm asking you is once you got this Uber information, all those different locations, could any of the people who knew him best who saw him like on a daily or week on a daily basis or 2 to 3 times a week business, give you any idea of why he was any of those locations at all, including 1338 Berkeley Street?
No, they just noted that it was kind of a sketchy area of town,
Okay.
you know, but they again said they didn't know why he would be down there.
Okay, so the people who knew him best, who were seeing the most often, probably the people probably got to know him the best, being that they were around him, helping him with the sober grid, and just in his daily life, going, hanging out. The people who know him best, looking at those locations and kind of shrugging their shoulders, everything else. All right, let's move on to this. Now, we should know that Beau had a car, but he wasn't driving it. Of course, I think about LA. Everybody has a car. It's not like New York City where people can grow up and never get a driver's license. LA is
Mhm.
completely the opposite. He had a car but wasn't driving it. Why? What was wrong with it? Did he ever drive it?
Yes, he did drive it. I mean, the day he got home, he left for an hour and came back with like takeout food on the surveillance that I watched, because I watched that surveillance for weeks until it finally got written over. But anyway, um, I told you a while ago that the family joke was how Beau lost things. Well,
Mhm.
he had lost his garage door opener, and so he had he'd ordered a new one, but he hadn't gotten it yet. So he was sharing a 2-car garage right beside his apartment, with another lady, another tenant in the building. And so unless, I think she was a teacher maybe, but anyway, unless she had the garage door open, he couldn't get in to access his car, right?
Huh.
So he, you know, he, I mean, the car did have a little bit of trouble. I noticed whenever I went out there and I tried driving it it had like some front end problem or something. Like he'd let somebody borrow it and they had, hit something, run over something. But anyway, but primarily it was the inability to get into the garage to get his car most of the times. He drove it the 29th,
He
but
did.
then on the 30th, he couldn't get in the garage because the garage doors closed and he didn't have a fob to get to it.
Okay, so that's why he had to take the Uber. Because I have to ask this because people know that Uber is not cheap, and you start riding around LA, that can get expensive really, really quickly, especially going to all these locations. He's out for a couple hours. I mean, that had to have been over $100. Whereas if he had his car, that total driving gas might take $15. So that's why I feel like I have to make it clear that he had
Yeah,
a car, but there was something reason he couldn't drive it that day. And your reason is because he couldn't get in the garage. That is your belief.
right. You couldn't get in the garage, your brother was closed. So
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's move on to this. Being that the assistant went over to Beau's place, when you got to see it, when other people got into it, anything unusual that you saw? Any his friends, other than his assistant, anybody else see anything unusual? Anything missing? Any additional phones or anything like that?
I didn't I didn't see any of that. He had ordered a new iPhone for whatever reason, I don't even know.
Mhm.
Um, and it had been delivered, but he had never activated it. And I don't even know what happened to it actually.
Okay.
I don't know if one of the, I don't know. I mean, whenever we went out there to clean out the apartment, we were happy to give anybody anything that they needed or could use.
Hmm.
Like if you were living in a sober living house and you didn't have, a bed, or you didn't have dishes, or, we were happy to give that stuff away. But
Hmm. Did you
I just
find
remember
when
the Apple phone, and he had a new computer in a box too,
you
like
did?
it's a
Okay.
HP. Yeah,
Okay. And all right. So when you cleaned out his place, did you find anything unusual? I have to ask, did you find any drugs, anything like that?
did not find any drugs. No, just a
Okay.
dirty apartment.
Okay. Anything, once again, that caught your attention? Maybe I should ask you this. Anybody else's stuff there? Anything there with anybody else's name on it? Not that he stole anything, but maybe somebody else there was like living with him, something like that. Any clothes or anything that he might not thought of would have been his?
No,
None.
it did not appear to us. No.
Okay, very good. let's move on to this. Now we know that Beau was this relationship with Jason was ending, but he lives in Michigan. But I have to ask, did Jason go to LA? Did he try to help? We have to make clear that he was not in LA at the time, so we want to take away any suspicion of that. But did he have any insight into any of this regarding just the disappearance?
No, no, he didn't know he didn't know anything else either.
Okay. Did he ever go? You all went out there to try to help. Did he go out?
Not that I'm aware of.
No. Okay. All right, let's move on to this next item on and we're just going to touch on these, just in general regarding these particular locations that we've already talked about. Let's start with Kohler Street. Is this known as a rough area of town?
I, I, I don't know about how rough it is, but it's not the best place to be, is what I've been told.
Okay. And has anybody, once again, anybody that you've talked to, anybody of assistance, any friends ever figured out what he was doing there?
No, no,
No. And how long
no.
was he in that general vicinity? I think maybe you said it was about 15 minutes or
15,
something.
yeah, 15 minutes.
Okay, so he's in the vicinity of Kohler Street for about 15 minutes. And then he takes the next trip up to 5806, and this is where the massage parlor is, and we'll get into a little deeper now, being that you talked about it before. Why don't you detail what you learned about him going up there, how long he was there, and who everybody got spoken to up there? There was a woman working at this massage parlor, etc. What can you say about that?
Okay. This Craner Avenue is just a residential house. It's 5 minutes away from this Praya Massage, which
Okay.
is where this Pachari Chapa worked, who we found because of the Venmo charge.
Okay.
And Joe had interviewed her on February the 1st. And he said she was very hard to understand, her broken English. She did not know Beau, except that she had provided services at the, working at the Praya Massage. And, it's a real massage place. I'm not kidding. I mean, yeah, we did think, oh, it's one of those places, right? But as I mentioned, our people on the ground checked it out and said it was indeed a real massage business. So.
Okay. All right. And how long, once again, according to your records, how long was he at that place?
30 minutes.
30 minutes. Okay. And we know, once again, he was there because there's a Venmo charge, which is, people don't know, that's like PayPal. It's a cash application. And would you say, if you don't have it written down, that's fine. But would you say that the amount that came out of his Venmo account was in relation to a massage?
It was $85. $85. And I know I personally pay roughly that for an hour, but I don't live in LA. So.
Right. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense then. And I'm not a massage guy at all because I don't like strange people putting their hands on me.
Their hands on you.
So I'm not a massage guy, so I wouldn't know which one costs. Okay. So he was there. It came out of his account. There's no allegations that somebody broke into his Venmo account and took that money from him. It's 100% that he gave that money willingly at that establishment. All right, so then he leaves there, and this is where he gets in the Uber that is technically the final Uber trip. But he stops at the 7-Eleven on Ventura Boulevard. You've talked about this video. We first have to talk about this. Was there video of him actually dropping his bag and things falling out? What can you say about that?
Well, I asked both my other two children because, we were all snapping pictures once, I got the idea. Oh my God, because I was so excited to see him that I didn't think at first to take pictures, and I should have got the whole video. But somebody did. I've asked Ben if he has it, and he says, "No, Mom, I don't have it." And I asked Brandy, and she says, "No, she doesn't have it." And I'm like, "Well, one of the two of you has that because I've seen it.
Okay.
It exists, and I don't know, what you've done with it." But anyway, so, but yeah, I mean, I remember watching him walk over to the Slurpee machine and get a Slurpee and put the lid on it and all that stuff. And then he walked up to the register to pay. Evidently his backpack had been unzipped, or maybe he unzipped it to get his wallet out. to pay. But as he was standing at the register, to pay, items fell out of the backpack. He had two laptops, a blue Windows, micro, whatever you call it. I don't know which, probably an HP, who knows? But anyway, and then he had an Apple. He always had both, one of each, a Mac and a Microsoft PC. And then other items fell out, like power cords, and I forget what exactly else fell out. But so he's jumps down, puts everything back in there, zips it back up, finishes paying for his items with his there's like an Apple Pay people use.
Yeah.
There was like an Apple Pay that he used that day. And then he walked out at 12:06. And they did not have outside cameras at the time. They have told me that they have since installed them, which doesn't do us any good now. But the inside camera showed him leaving, and he went to the right. So he must have gotten into the Uber. And I don't know if the Uber was one of those, the bigger ones, they will do a rideshare, right? And I believe it was a larger one, so he would have maybe had somebody else with him, but we've never been able to confirm that.
Okay. And just to correct something you said a moment ago, he left the 7-Eleven at not at 12:06, but 2:06.
I'm so sorry. Yes, 2:06.
2:06. All right, just want to correct. Okay. What did he? So he got this Slurpee, but probably, I mean, he bought a few things there, but probably the thing that's going to maybe jump out to everybody, he bought a bag of ice.
That doesn't surprise me if he was going directly home, as was originally supposedly the plan, because he had an ice maker in the apartment, because he just had a little fridge. He had a separate ice maker that he bought, and the damn thing didn't work. So buying a bag of ice wasn't a surprise to me if he in fact was going home. So why the plans changed, I don't know.
Okay, so
but he bought Dr. Pepper. He bought sodas and mouthwash and gum. I don't know.
Okay. Maybe we should go through what do you remember everything that he bought at the 7-Eleven, if you can remember. You just went through those things. Maybe let's go through them again. What you got? The Slurpee, you got some
Dr.
Slurpee,
Pepper. He got two sodas, a Slurpee and a Dr. Pepper. I told you he's a Dr. Pepper nut. A Slurpee and two sodas, mouthwash, bubble gum, the ice. He bought some dish soap, some disinfecting wipes, and rubbing alcohol. Those are the exact items on the receipt.
Okay, that's quite a bit to buy at a 7-Eleven, but that was convenient, and I guess seemingly it was on his way. And once again, you think that, for example, the bag of ice is because the ice maker in his place didn't work,
right? So I mean, that didn't surprise me for that reason alone. But then the fact that he changed locations, it's like, wow. Yeah. What do you do with a bag of ice now? So
right, and that goes back to somebody, I guess, not one of you, but one of the investigators determining that the original location that he was supposed to be going was back home, but instead he went to this Berkeley Street address, which technically they're kind of close. They're only like 2.5 miles away from each other, and they're in kind of the same direction.
Yeah, right? They are very close. Yeah.
Okay, they are close. And once again, I'm going to be doing a YouTube video so everybody can see this, because it can get a little confusing just doing, audio like this. All right, so he's there. These things dump out, puts him back in, seemingly goes out. We know then that approximately 10 minutes later, he does this 911, and we're going to get back to that in a moment. And this message and what it said and everything. But eventually, of course, this address got turned to 1338 Berkeley Street. Now, we're going to get into the who lived there, but what's maybe weird about this is this was right across from the gym that Beau usually went to.
Yeah, it was diagonally across. And real quick, if I can just back up, the lady at 7-Eleven recognized Beau. She let us hang a poster there, but she said that he came in often and bought cigarettes, which made us think that he must have a friend in that area of Ventura Boulevard. Yeah, because there were all apartments around, lots of apartments right there. And like you had indicated, a huge hill with really nice houses up there.
Yeah. So that's right. I know that area well. I've been on Ventura Boulevard many times back in the day. Okay. Right. All right. So, but going back to 1338 Berkeley Street, that is an apartment / house that we'll get to. But almost right across the street is Beau's gym. It's called like Gym Exchange or something like that.
Yeah, I got it. Exchange Fit. And it
Jane?
is, so yeah, so 1338 Berkeley is a house right here, like a gate, a lock gate.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's an empty lot in a street. And so diagonally across from that is where the gym that he would go to was at. And somebody spoke to the trainer there, who he worked with, and they said that they hadn't seen Beau in a while since like August or September.
Okay, so a while before that. Okay,
Yeah.
and so what we're saying is Burke. What we're saying is Exchange Fit was on the opposite side of the street of as 1338,
Yeah.
right across the
It's
street
diagonal.
on the other
Mm-hmm.
diagonal. Okay. Now, regarding 1338 Berkeley Street, you didn't find out about this address till well after you had gone down to LA and, kind of poking around and everything. You eventually found out that who lived there.
A lady by the name of Joe Good.
Okay. And I want everybody to remember her name for later. But I just want to remind everybody that we believe now that Berkeley Street was not the address that was originally put in. It was put in after Beau had put in his original street address, his home, but something in there changed his mind about where he was going to go. All
At
right.
least that's what Kyle had said. I mean,
Mhm.
we,
Okay.
we have to go by what he said.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to get to the 911 text, and of course, let's just go over it again. He's at the 7-Eleven. He leaves there at 2:06. Approximately 10 minutes later, this 911 text comes in through the app. So
Yep.
what exactly did the message say?
Okay, I'm looking at the CHP incident detail report,
Mm-hmm.
and it says at 11:30, 14/19/54, and it's got some numbers, and it says response. 1, I'm taking a trip with Uber, period, gray.
Okay.
Then 2 seconds later is a response from 911, and it says NFD, and I don't know what that means. And then two more, well, actually, yeah, two more, 5 more seconds later, sorry, they responded, and it said no response.
Okay. All right. I think I looked up NFD. It says no. I think it stands for no further discussion or something like that. But that is the only text that came from Beau's phone.
Right.
And it says, I'm taking a trip with Uber, period, gray. So,
Yes.
when we say gray, we have to remember it's spelled Gray, not Grey. I guess people can spell the color either way. Now, I have to ask you something. We're going to get to this Uber driver and all that later, but your understanding was the vehicle that he was in that day, Beau was in, was it gray?
Yeah. What we found in front of this guy's house was a gray van.
All
Yes.
right. All right. So there's reason to believe that that text was true and that the vehicle he was in was gray slash maybe silver.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all we're trying to determine there. It was not like he said, I'm taking a trip with Uber and he said gray, but then we figured out eventually that the vehicle he was in was red. It
No.
wasn't it
Well,
wasn't anything like that.
no.
Okay. Uh the 911 response, of course, it sounded like it was just an automated response, being that it came in like 2 seconds later and then something 5 seconds later or whatever else.
Mhm.
Did the police ever been able to give you any idea of do a lot of mistakes happen with these apps? Have they ever say, "Oh, we get texts like this all the time. People thinking that they're using the text and they're doing this." Have they ever had LAPD ever said anything like that to you?
No. They just interviewed Kyle the driver twice, and they got a court order to get the Uber records,
Mm-hmm.
and they did not share them with me. She said she had to,
Right.
what word I used, she had to figure them out. In other words,
Okay, you talked about that earlier. So we're not
right?
sure if this is a common thing. People are going to, I have my own interpretation in it, but I don't spoon feed the audience. but it would be helpful to know how often this 911 service within the app is used, maybe for us to gauge, what was the context. We can certainly believe that there was something bad going on. I mean, obviously, people, want to believe that they can, but I would just like to know, on the other hand, how many people maybe use it within the app, maybe by mistake. Of course, we don't have Beau's phone. You have a copy, I guess, of his phone with everything that was on his phone at the time, but you don't have that necessarily um, on. You don't have the phone that he had on that day. So this text comes in, and you've already established that after that text happened, no more communication with Beau's phone at all. Correct? Through the
Correct.
app or anything else, social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, anything. You've never seen any
Correct.
messages or anything like that.
The
Okay.
only thing is, exactly 10 minutes after he was dropped at 1330 at Berkeley,
Hmm.
there was, and I had it, there was an email that came through from his bank saying that his online activity had been disabled for too many password attempts.
Right. Yep, we're gonna get to that. That is down the outline when we get to the banking information. Okay.
Which at first I thought it was an ATM, but it wasn't. It was an online banking. So somebody was trying to log in on, I
Okay.
guess, his laptop.
All right. You've already mentioned him a couple times. We can say his full name because his name is already out there in the public sphere, so we're not revealing something secret. The Uber driver's name was Kyle Abramson. How did you find out who he was?
We had hired a PI who he actually found out the name. I don't know how he found out, but he found out, took, found the fact that this is his address. There's a gray Uber out front. LinkedIn still shows that he's been driving for Uber for 8 years. He still drives for Uber. Found him on Facebook, all of that.
All right. So somehow, some way, they figured out that Kyle Abramson was the driver.
Correct.
Okay. And have you ever been able to establish, had Kyle ever given Beau any rides before that day or any other day? Has that ever been established anywhere?
No. Jill has never given me any of the information that she obtained when she got the court order for the Uber records, which I
Hmm.
would believe might match up to something if
It
you're
might.
investigating as you should be.
Right. We just don't know.
Right.
Maybe if whether Beau had access to his car or not, it very well could be that 2 months before that Kyle and Beau happened to run into each other before because Kyle's a driver in the area and Beau needed a ride. It's certainly possible, but there's no proof of that.
Right. And in
Oh,
my mind, it's not very plausible either because he lives up in Yorba Linda, which I don't know
mhm,
California. I have to get a map back out and look. But
mhm.
from what I understand, it's like 45 minutes away from the Brentwood area where Beau
It's
lived.
and it's farther than that. It's like an hour and 15 minutes, maybe longer,
Oh,
depending on
okay.
traffic.
Okay.
All right, so we'll have to figure that into all of this. But where did Kyle pick Beau up originally? Up at the
5806 Craner Avenue,
Okay, so that is where Kyle Abramson picked
which,
Beau up.
yep. And it was north of the 101.
Right.
So he picks him up, and in place of getting on the 101, they go, go straight to the 7-Eleven.
Hmm.
Beau's in there like 10 minutes, we think, because the ride started at 1:51 and he was exiting at 2:06. And provided the clocks aren't off by a few minutes,
Hmm.
that's roughly 15 minutes. So, if you're going to go in the store and pick up items, you get in and out in 5 minutes. But anyway,
Okay, so what we're establishing here is Kyle picked him up at the Craner Street address and then sat there in the car or the van or whatever it was while Beau went into the 7-Eleven and bought all those items and then came up back out to Kyle's vehicle. That's what
yep,
happened. Okay. So when did the police question Kyle and what did he say?
they did. And when they interviewed him the first time, he claimed that he took Beau back to his apartment and they let him go. So I called them back and I said, hey, I've been watching the video because luckily the apartment complex people were wonderful. They were so helpful. But it set on the timer, so I had the clock was ticking. But I sat there and I watched for hours and hours and hours, about 10 days nonstop. And the camera was pointing directly at his door, so there's no way that I could have messed up. He was never brought back to his apartment.
Huh.
So I went back to the police and I told them that the Uber driver lied. So they pulled him in again a second time. And he said, oh no, I took him back where I picked him up in West Hollywood. And she took it at face value and left it at that. And she told me, I cannot tell you the address in West Hollywood, just that he was dropped there. So again, we got her to the phone finally, and we had the answer that indeed he was dropped at 1338 Berkeley and not at either one of the two addresses that the Uber driver had proclaimed.
Okay. So, out of Kyle's mouth, he never said 1338 Berkeley Street. You figured that out on your own through the Uber records. Kyle never said 1338 Berkeley Street at all.
Correct. And unless he told Jill that, the police that, and the police lied to me and told me that, my belief is Kyle's story is what she told me, that he took him back where he picked him up in West Hollywood.
Okay. Not to put a doubt in anybody's mind. It does say, I mean, certainly the second story about, well, no, wait a minute, I turned around and dropped. That certainly sounds suspicious, but we also have to keep in mind it very well that he could have dropped him off at 1338 Berkeley Street and Kyle just could have been taking for granted that's where Beau lived. He might have thought he was dropping off at quote unquote Beau's apartment, but that's not Beau's apartment. That's where somebody else.
Yeah, you're right.
So
you're absolutely right. I mean,
not,
I didn't think about it in those terms, but yes, you're right.
There's a little wiggle room in there. It just need to throw it there. I really don't know one way or the other. I mean, I have my suspicions, but it's up to the audience to determine. Regarding Kyle, was he ever asked about the 911 call that was made while Beau was in his vehicle? What did he say about it?
I don't believe that the police ever told me anything specific to that, except there's the way it's supposed to work, the way that app is explained. If anybody wants to ever go look on Uber's website and look at it, the driver is not notified that the person called 911 because it's theoretically supposed to be a safety mechanism, because there's been so many people who have been harmed by Uber drivers that it's not known to the driver that a call has been made to 911. And I'm only assuming, I don't know, suddenly cop cars will surround them and pull them over, but assuming it works that way, I don't know.
Okay, so, but you don't know anything. I mean, I'm going to guess they asked Kyle about it, but we don't know what Kyle's response was it when he was confronted with the information. Well, you know, this guy who was riding with you texted 911. We don't know Kyle's reaction to any of that.
That is correct. We do not.
All right. And do you have any information that Kyle ever stated, well, you know what, he and I did have a problem when he was in the car? Anything like that?
I've not been told that, no.
Okay.
And the police are very tight-lipped. You know, it's an active investigation, so they won't tell me a lot.
Right. Well, on the other hand, they did tell you that Kyle's story changed, though.
They did.
Right. All right. So they did tell you some things. All right.
Well, they didn't tell me Kyle's story changed. I told them that Kyle's story was a lie because I had watched the videotape for 10 days straight. And so I knew good and well he wasn't taken home. So that meant the Uber driver was lying. So the police, I asked them to
but then they got back to you and then said,
and they did admit it. Yes.
Okay. All right. These are just questions, and you know that they're coming because they're in the outline. Once again, I realize the police have been tight-lipped, but I have to ask these questions anyway, just to make sure all the bases are covered. Did Kyle ever state what he and Beau talked about on the trip that day?
No.
Any scuttlebutt about anything? Talk about the weather, talked about sports, talked about music, talked about anything at all?
No. From what the police officer told me, he remarked that he didn't even remember Beau.
Okay. And maybe
So
I
he
should
wouldn't.
ask you this.
So
When did
therefore,
they,
he wouldn't remember a conversation, probably, right?
okay. In you, approximately how long after Beau's disappearance did they track Kyle down?
I will have to go back into my emails to
Would you say
find
it
that
was a,
answer.
would you say it was a couple months?
Oh yeah,
All right. Okay,
yeah.
that's good enough.
They
All
don't.
right.
They're slow,
Yep, they
if
are.
anything.
Okay. And but you already stated before that Kyle at the time was driving some sort of gray vehicle. It might have even been some sort of van.
That's what I believe. Yes.
Okay. Now, what I can tell you in looking Kyle up is that we've learned on Unfound, unfortunately, this doesn't mean much, but people are usually interested in this information. I did look Kyle Abramson up. As far as I could tell, he has no criminal record. He, as far as I could tell, he still is driving for Uber a
Hmm.
year and some months later. But then I throw this back to you. Is there a record of Beau paying for that ride to 1338 Berkeley Street on November 30th of 2021? Is there a record of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, um, I forget which credit card it hit. I forget if it was
I
the
think it was through
Venmo.
I think it was through Venmo.
It might have been Venmo. I'd have to go back and look. I mean, a lot of information, and I haven't retained it all very well.
That's all right, and that's why I have the notes here. So so Kyle, one way or the other, got paid for that trip.
Yes.
All right, and it ended up being like 40 some dollars.
Correct.
I don't know if the tips included or not. Okay, so something went on there. That doesn't mean they actually ended up at 1338 Berkeley Street, but it does mean that at some point the ride did end and the driver got paid. All right,
Hmm.
so moving on, I have to ask you about this, and I just want you to stay where this came from. Rumor out there that Kyle Abramson did not drive for Uber for several days after that. Where does that even come from?
That came from the PI that I mentioned earlier, who claims to have found that it was Kyle Abramson. He had. I'm not sure how he found out after going through all the Kyles, but he was 100% convinced that it was Kyle Abramson. And he further told me, and I don't know, I mean, we never could substantiate it. We couldn't really corroborate it, but he had said that some neighbors said that Kyle didn't drive for a few days. He was cleaning out his van. But as I said, we never corroborated that whatsoever. We've never gotten to the bottom of, some of the neighbors said they never saw such a thing. So we got conflicting stories,
Yeah.
and we never really got to the bottom of that at all.
I
So
mean, Kyle is works for Uber. He has to clean his vehicle sooner or later, right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
Uber drivers do clean their vehicles because that's how they get rated if they want to continue to have work. If they show up with a dirty, messed up vehicle, then, their ratings are going to go down, which means they're not going to get any riders. So
yeah,
there's a flip side to that. And the listeners know over 280 disappearances how I feel about things when people start saying stuff like that. It
yeah,
certainly sounds suspicious until you start thinking about it in everyday terms of, might have something to do with it, but with Beau's disappearance, but I'm not going to believe it because he was cleaning his van out. Okay,
yeah.
but maybe there's
And
something.
also, real quick, if I can throw this in, one of Beau's good friends from back in the days in Houston, when he was living in Houston, in Texas, he's another angel who says he's not going to give up looking for Beau,
Mhm.
even if we don't have any more leads. He spoke to Kyle and a couple of times, and he said
Mhm.
Kyle was not very nice at all. He threatened to turn this person into the cops for harassment, which I find kind of funny because they can't look for missing people, but they can bother with, harassment filings. But anyway, so probably he'd been harassed by the private eye that we called enough, and he's tired of talking to anybody. But I
That
don't think the
happens.
police did a very good interrogation of him, in my own
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, well, that happens. It's one of those things. It certainly sounds suspicious, and it very well may be. But I also know human nature is when you tell the truth over and over and over to somebody, and people don't believe you. At some point, you do get frustrated. So there's a flip side. There's two ways to look at that. Don't know what to think.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to this. Now, 1338 Berkeley Street. The woman that was living there, her name was Joe Good, also known as Joanna Good. And if the what I think other people might have discovered this as well, but I actually sent you a picture of her back in the day. That she was actually at one time an actress and model. And she was in a very famous episode of the show Married with Children. Remember that with the Bundys? And she was one of the models. That was the episode where Kelly Bundy was trying to become a spokesmodel for a car called the Cadillac Alante. And Joe Good was one of her competitors in that episode. This is who this woman is, way back in about 1991 or something.
Mhm.
And but she was the one living at 1338 Berkeley Street.
Mhm.
How did you find out who was living there? Do you remember how you found that out who was living there, Amy?
I think just a simple people search that one of us did. I mean, keep in mind we had
Mm,
like 12 or 15 of us that were all trying to pitch in and Google and look at stuff.
right.
Um, we actually had somebody go there and kind of check it out to see, what kind of place it was. It was in a nice enough neighborhood. It was, it didn't look like it was a bad area at all.
No.
Um, but exactly how we found out her specifically, I can't remember. But we did send our guys, our
Hmm.
angels on the ground. We did have them go over there and talk to her, and I don't recall exactly how we knew her name.
Okay. And you've sent me a recording of that 10-minute conversation, and I intend to play that after this interview is over so that people can hear Joe Good's words regarding all of this for themselves. But do you know, once you found out that it's 1338 Berkeley Street, it's in Santa Monica, California, do you know if any investigator went over to talk to her one on one? Or did they, ask her to come down
Yes,
to the
I
headquarters with her?
finally got Jill to go over there and talk to her. Yes.
Okay, and do you know the results of that discussion and what Joe said?
She said that she had visited with Joe Good, interviewed her. She
Mm.
felt like that she, you know, had a problem, so to speak. I don't know if she was trying to say she was high or
Hmm.
drunk or something. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Uh, at any time when Jill spoke to Joe, did Joe ever admit knowing Beau?
no,
Okay. All right. So she seemingly knew nothing about a
she,
Beau
yeah,
Mann in an Uber. Her address is there. She's renting, by the way. She did not own the building. And other people live on the property too, but it's technically a different address. But she never heard of Beau Mann before.
that is correct. That's what she said. That was what she claimed forever and ever.
Hmm.
We do know that they have like nine, I believe, friends on Facebook that are mutual friends. That doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily mean that they know each other, but
That's
it does
true.
mean that they kind of run in the same circles. They could or
Right.
couldn't.
Okay.
Um,
But they
but
were
I
not, but
do
just to be
believe it may be in the recording or it may just be a recollection of one of the guys that were there interviewing her. But I thought that they felt that she had slipped and said something about his business. And, after the fact, the guys were
Mhm.
saying, well, how does she know he has a business? So,
Mhm.
there was just some suspicion there that
Okay.
she did indeed know him, even though she
Okay.
denied it forever.
Okay. But
And it
going
very well
back to what you
could
said, going back to what you said though, they were not, as far as you could tell, they were not one-on-one friends on Facebook, but
they were not.
they had mutual friends
Yes.
on Facebook. Okay. I know what they are. All right. But we should talk about because it's public being that it's on Facebook. Once her name came up, of course, the police went to talk to her. These guys went to talk to her, and I'm going to get to that eventually. But eventually, it all became very public. She was responding to people on Facebook about Beau's disappearance, and how did she act?
Oh, I mean, I'm not a part of that group, but I have friends that are. And I was told that, she was very, oh, what's the word?
we'll just keep this very. She wasn't very nice.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
was
I
a bit
was
sarcastic,
very
and
sarcastic. I'm
she was
talking about,
sarcastic, and even to the point of saying, "Well, he's gone, and you're never going to find his body." Correct? That's what she said.
exactly. And she also said, what do you guys want me to do? Tell you where the body's at?
Right.
You know,
Right.
um, just
Right.
just very, very tacky. Very,
Okay.
But as you mentioned earlier, maybe she just started to get belligerent because she got tired of people asking her.
That could very well could be. That'll be something for the audience to decide for themselves. All right. So, weird point number one is that there's kind of a stumper. What are the odds that the address that goes into the Uber is the address of somebody who that person who lives there and Beau have mutual friends? What are the odds of that?
Right.
All right.
And
So we
and
move
she
on to this,
claimed,
please.
yeah. No, I was just going to say that she claimed that on November the 30th that she was not even home. She was in a rehab and that she had friends there.
Okay. I don't know if we have any proof of that, though. All right.
Right.
So then the other thing is, though, and this is kind of confusing. We need to really, really get this straightened out. Was there records? Was Beau's name and phone number in, or was Joe's name and phone number in Beau's phone? Yes or no?
Okay. It was, but it was not because Beau had talked to Joe. Alexis, when she was downloading all this stuff and we were trying to gather as much information as we could, when she obtained those numbers, she threw them in Beau's contact list just as numbers. But she was not, I'm sorry, yeah, Joe Good was not in his cloud account whatsoever. And we looked back at his phone records for like a year. Her number, or those three numbers, were never found to have been called or have had a call received. So
Okay.
they were essentially, just there because Alexis put them there because we believed that Joe knew something and we wanted access to her numbers to contact her.
All right. See, this is how things can get messed up in investigations very easily
Exactly, because
because you
we
have a phone.
were,
Yeah,
yeah,
because you have a phone that you're using as records of people that Beau knew before he went missing. Once you start putting in new information in there, you forget what is old information and you forget what is new information, and it all
right.
runs together, and that's how these things can get confused.
And what
So,
had happened is Alexis sent me the phone after about 6 months of us doing all this investigating and everything. She said, "Well, I might as well just send it to you now." And she had forgot it was in there. And I was just sitting here one day thinking, what the heck? Let me go scroll and look at his contacts, and I saw Joe Good in there. And I jumped to the conclusion that they absolutely had to have known each other. And
all
I
right.
told Jill Calhoun, please go back and talk to this lady again because she's in his phone 3 times. But it was my mistake because I didn't realize that it was there only because we were trying to gather information
All
about her at the time.
right. Okay, so we have to remember that. So,
Mm.
for the record, there is no proof that Joe and Beau knew each other. They have mutual friends. I have a lot of mutual friends on Facebook who I don't know. Of course, I have a long list of friends on Facebook because of what I knew. I'm kind of internationally known. But they have friends. I don't know any of those people, and it very well been this is the way. But we still have to start calculating what are the odds that the address that's put in there was a mutual friends of other people that Beau knew. All right,
Yeah.
moving on to this criminal record. Does Joe Good or did Joe Good have a criminal record?
I have a friend out in California who's been super helpful with all of this. Her name's Julie. She she was able to pull up police records and at the time, this is early on, she could pull them up and she actually called me and read off all these arrest records that Joe had for possession, and at least one of them she was arrested at LAX. And so and I mean, she's gone now, and I'm sorry, all the stuff has gone now because she went back to look it up because she said, I wonder why I didn't print that when I first ran across it, because everything has seemingly disappeared. I guess there are people you can pay that can kind of have you disappear off all kinds of websites.
There
And
are, yeah.
so, yeah, that's what we think has happened. But I mean, bless her heart, if she really had, from what I'm understanding, decades of addiction problems and having, possession. It's tragic. It's very
Right.
sad.
And so once again, given that Beau's business was reaching out to people with addiction, trying to create this community to support each other, once again, what are the odds that the address ends up being of a person who has an addiction and has had one for a
Yeah.
long time? What are the odds of
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
This is how we have to start looking at these things. So, but let's just ask you this. How about between the Uber driver Kyle and Joe Good? Any connection between those two ever been established?
Not that I know of.
Okay, so we have this Uber driver who it seems might have changed stories. Of course, he's saying, I just dropped Beau off. I don't know what to tell you. And then maybe he changed his story. Being that we're not there firsthand to hear what he said, it's hard to tell. But, and I will say what I think I've learned about Kyle Abramson is that he and Joe Good do not seem to would have ever run in the same circles. But maybe. So I have to ask you this now. This is why I guess doing this interview right now is somewhat coincidental. Where is Joe Good now?
Well, bless her heart, she actually passed away about 2 weeks ago.
She
Yeah,
passed
and
away. Yep, January 14th, 2023.
yeah,
She
and it was a direct result. I was told a direct result of her issues with addiction. So that's
Mhm.
very sad. I hate to hear that about anybody.
Right. So after this appearance, of course, she was interviewed. We're going to talk about this interview, this recording that a couple people did of her, heard them talking to her. The police went to talk to her. Of course, she had all this interaction with people online, being quite obstinate and defiant and sarcastic about Beau's disappearance. And now we know that January 14th, 2023, she's now gone. So she can't be questioned anymore.
Yeah,
All right. And we have to, if you have it in your records, what was the arrival time? Because this is going to lead into our next topic. What was the arrival time, allegedly, of Kyle and Beau arriving at 1338 Berkeley Street? What was the arrival
the Uber records indicate 2:35 p.m.
Okay. And that does seem about right, being that on the 7-Eleven video, you have a particular time, then you have a arrival date at Berkeley Street. It seems to be pretty close. Pretty
Yeah,
close.
it's
Pretty close. It's
seven.
not
I think
like
it's 17 miles in roughly 30 minutes with no traffic or
it's
with typical traffic for 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
it's pretty close. Yeah, it'd be hard. It's not a lot of wiggle room there. Okay.
Mm.
And like I said, I have this recording of Joe talking to a guy you've mentioned. His first name is another Joe. This is really, we got a Beau, we got a Joe, and then we got another Joe, who's a guy who I got to speak to last night. And I will talk about this recording that he and another person made of Joe when they went down to speak to her. Um, but in it, what I would say is Joe tries to sell out a friend of hers regarding all of this, but that's all I really want to talk about for now.
Okay.
So there is a recording. I will play it afterwards, but we're going to move on to this because of this arrival date now being very fresh in everybody's minds. At 2:35, according to Uber, that's when the 1338 Berkeley Street address was reached. However, as you've already talked about, very quickly after that, there's a warning that came into Beau's mail from Wells Fargo. Let's talk about his banking information now.
Yeah, the email, and I don't know how much time it takes when you do screw up your login for it to
Mhm.
actually register and prompt out the email. But at 2:46 p.m., literally 10 minutes to the drop off time,
Mhm.
he had an email that said, "We recently suspended online access to your accounts because you had several attempts to sign on with an incorrect username or password."
Mhm.
And so he was denied access. You know.
Okay. And that was information that you got fairly early on, right? Or when did you?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you got this.
I mean, we were looking at so many different things. Looking at his email wasn't something we did constantly, more as we were trying, calling hospitals, calling,
Right.
morgues. I mean, we were doing all this active stuff, and the emails were, yes, it was there.
Okay,
We just didn't talk together immediately.
So you had access to his email. You saw that this email had come in that day, November 30th of 2021. But this was well
Mhm.
before you knew about Berkeley Street or any of that stuff, right? Well before that.
Yeah,
What did you,
yeah.
I have to ask you, being that you found out about this first, before you found out about Joe Good and Kyle Abramson and all these things, what did
Mhm.
you think when you saw that originally? What did you think? Maybe what did your daughter Brandy think? What did you think about that?
Based on the fact that all of his stuff had fallen out of his backpack, you
Mm-hmm.
know, um, and I'm not saying it's a bad area of town, Studio City. Like I said, they had a lot of nice apartments around there and everything. But
Yeah.
somebody could have been there that saw that. And so I will say that we thought, for an instance, what if that person saw that he had all this electronics and decided to steal them from him, use his logins, get to his bank account, whatever. I mean, that
Mhm.
thought did cross our minds.
Yeah.
But we really couldn't figure out how this guy or whoever could have gotten himself into the Uber as well. If he was, or maybe he followed Beau in the
Yeah.
Uber from 7-Eleven to Berkeley and then just got out and knocked him in the head, took his backpack, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those are, again, possibilities.
Yep. Seems
I mean,
overtly complex, but there's no doesn't defy the laws of physics or anything else. I guess it's certainly possible, even though I don't know how probable it is. So we know that somebody was trying to get into Beau's account or accounts just 10 minutes after the Berkeley Street address was arrived at.
right.
But we have to make clear this was not an access at an ATM where somebody has his card and is going up to like get cash. This was somebody actually
Online.
trying to online. It was actually online. So we do like our banking online. It was something like that.
Right. And I mean,
Okay.
most likely, I don't know about you, but on all my accounts, work and stuff, my name stays up there. It's just the password I have to type in.
Yeah.
So if you want to steal somebody's laptop and you want to log into stuff, it could be pretty easy to do, I
It,
guess.
it could be, and I think you bring up a good point. Is that it would seem that if somebody, something happens at 1338 Berkeley Street, whether we think Joe Good had something to do with it or not, somebody would have had all of Beau's stuff. Would have had the computers, would have had the phone. You'd think there would have been an easy way to kind of rig it. I forgot. As we've done before, we forget our password. You get sent an email, you just reestablish it. Could have got into those accounts very easily. You wouldn't have to try to make a mistake 10 times. But to your knowledge, is there still money in those accounts? Did anybody really ever break into them to your knowledge?
Nobody ever did break into them. Nobody ever broke into anything. I mean, there was never, a credit card wasn't used, ATMs weren't used, Apple Card wasn't used, no, nothing was ever used.
Okay. What about an
For
IP address? Was anybody
I've
able to
asked the
establish?
police.
Please.
Yes, I've asked the police. Couldn't they please get? I even called the bank and asked them if I could get it, and of course they told me no. But I asked the police to get a court order and get that IP address right, and she ignored me. So, which she
Okay.
normally does.
All right. So we do not know. We know that somebody was trying to access that account or accounts at Wells Fargo. We can say what the bank is, but we do not know the location of where the computer was or anything.
No, and the IP address would obviously tell us if it was Joe Good's house or not,
It would.
or exactly where he was. But
I agree.
it just defies logic why these people cannot do simple things. I know they're overwrought out there with the homeless population, and
Mhm.
100 people supposedly are reported missing in LA every single day. But there's only 8 people that work the missing persons unit, and so
Yep.
I kind of feel bad for them. But then again, you don't have to come into work at 9 a.m. and leave at 4:30 p.m. You could pull a 12-hour day, which is what I did for the majority of my career, right? I mean, how much do you really want to do a good job? How much do you really want to
Yeah.
solve a case? How much do you really want to give family some peace?
And
They have
especially since,
bankers hours.
yeah, especially it's not like we're asking them to go down into a basement and go through thousands and thousands of paperwork. All they have to do is send in a request. We need the IP address for this access. Could you get this for us? Thanks.
Right. And I've
That's all you
still
need.
never gotten anything from, the phone records that she downloaded from all the Uber records. And, she's just not telling me anything. So I don't know give a shit, if she is just overwhelmed and feels like it's a lost cause. I don't know whether she maybe thinks there's a real something here and she's, can't tell me anything because
Yeah,
it could be a murder investigation or
could
something,
be.
but she just won't tell me things. So
Oh, okay. All right. So we have Berkeley Street gets there seemingly alive. If we're gonna, but then 10 minutes later, somebody is trying to get into his banking account.
right.
Um, Let me ask you this: being that you had access to his email, did you ever find any circumstances in the past, maybe let's just say within the last 6 months, if you went back that far, of any times where somebody was trying to get into Beau's accounts and failed? Were there any other warnings from Wells Fargo in his email accounts that you saw?
No.
No.
No. I mean,
Okay.
yeah,
All
nothing.
right. So it just happens to be on the day that he goes missing that we have these warnings coming from Wells Fargo, and they never happened before.
Or never happened again. I don't know about
Never,
before, but
never. Yeah. Well, before we're just wondering, how common was this? Is it a coincidence
he
that,
was really good about his passwords. He would remember that stuff. He just would physically lose things.
okay. Let's move on to this. Of course, we mentioned Blake Brown. This is a guy that, the Beau said, well, when I get back to LA, I might want to check this guy out. What did Blake Brown have to say about this? Have you ever spoken to him? And I have
I
to
have,
admit, in
yeah.
one of our conversations, you might have thought that maybe Blake Brown was hanging around Beau a little too much, stalking. Please explain.
Um, well, someone had told me, which was conflicting because he's showing Brandy a picture saying he's going to meet up with this guy. Now I don't know if that meant just whether he just left out the part that I know this guy with his sister, but my impression was he was going to meet him for the first time. But it could be either way. Could be
Okay.
yes, he knew this guy, and what do you think about him, sis? Right? But because I had since heard from one of his friends of his sobriety groups out there that this guy had done some work for Beau and had actually Beau let him stay there on the couch for a while.
I see. Who
So
told you? Who was that? If
and
you
he
can name the
couldn't get
name.
him to leave. No, and he couldn't get him to leave. So
Okay.
this friend of his, who's a big guy, went over there and forced him to leave. Now, we found that this guy, this Blake, has a record. Again, this is hearsay. I don't have firsthand knowledge, but I'm told that he has a record. I'm told that his father is in prison. I'm told he's just not a nice guy.
Mhm.
We give everything to the police. She
Yeah.
goes over to talk to him, and he says, "I was in Vegas when he was, on the 30th. I wasn't around. I never hooked up with, we never hooked up or anything. We never. I know it's got a bad connotation now, but we never saw each other. We never got together." And
Okay.
and so he hands her his phone, this Blake guy, and says, "See, look at our text conversations." Well, any idiot knows that you can sit there and delete text messages. So how do we know he didn't delete a bunch of text messages and then just show the police what he wanted them to see?
That's
So
true.
she
That's
could,
speculation, but that's possible. Maybe I need to ask you this. Do you even know where Blake Brown lived at the time? Did he live anywhere near around Berkeley Street, to your knowledge?
I would have to go back and find, because
Mhm.
back then, yes, I had an address for him. He has since moved, and I'm told he lives in what's south of LA,
San
on the
Diego?
outskirts. No, 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 not that far south, but on
All
like
right.
on the outskirts of
Orange
LA. But
County, Santa Ana, California.
you can actually look on his Facebook page
Okay.
and find where he's
Okay.
at. But
Okay.
yeah,
So he's still out there. All right.
yeah, I
All
don't
right.
think that they did an adequate. I don't think they did an adequate interrogation of him. I'm not saying he's guilty of anything, but I think they should have looked a little harder at him too. Not
Okay.
that I have any reason to believe that he was anywhere in the area of 1330 Berkeley either.
Because here's what
So
we have to think about. Now, I'm a straight guy. I've been a bachelor my whole life, though. But when I hear that somebody's going to a 7-Eleven, I don't care their sexuality or anything else, but they're buying uh, soda, they're buying ice, but they also get gum and mouthwash. That sounds to me like somebody who is planning to meet somebody soon. That's what it sounds like to me, especially since even for me as a bachelor, I know I have mouthwash in my place already. So that sounds to me like Beau was going to meet somebody. So that's why
possibly,
then you brought up Blake Brown and being that I'm thinking about going to meet him. This is I think that I have to bring it up because I think that's going to be in a lot of the audience's minds as well. It's kind of what it seems like. We could say that, well, the ice machine isn't working, sure, but it also could be it's because he was going to meet somebody at somebody else's place and was bringing ice along for some reason. It's just something to think about. Who now? Let's move on. So we have Blake Brown. Was Blake Brown helpful in any way? Did he like take part in any of the
not at all.
investigations? Not at all.
Not
Okay.
at all.
All right. Any proof that Blake Brown might have known Joe Good?
No.
None. Okay. Let's move on to this guy. Who is Walt?
He was a friend of Beau's. Matter of fact, from what we were told, he went over to Beau's apartment that night, and I saw it on video. I saw him arrive, and then I saw him leave. He came over after work, and he brought food. He had like a takeout bag of food, like 8 o'clock at night, I believe it was. I don't have it in front of me right now, but I do have the time on a timeline that I made early on because it just wasn't, he wasn't that important. He They walked out of the apartment. Beau walked down toward the garage, and I guess he could see that the garage door was closed and he couldn't get into his car because he didn't have the opener to the garage. So this guy called an Uber and left. And he says that, they just kind of hung out. Beau was on his computer like he always is. They didn't talk too much, but they did make plans to go see a concert. Famous rapper guy.
Was it Kanye West?
That's it.
I remember
It's
that's
not
in my
my kind of
notes.
music.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yeah.
anyway, they were making plans to go to a Kanye West
All right.
concert, and Walt was going to get tickets, and I don't know. It seems like they had a message. He sent a Venmo or Cash App request to Beau for his ticket, but Beau never responded because he was missing.
Okay. And I did check Kanye West was due to be in LA within the next month or two, so I guess that conversation sounds plausible. I did look that up.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we have this Walt guy. Walt ever offer up any insight into Beau's disappearance at all? Any we don't talk about theories, but we can talk about other people's theories. Did he ever offer up a theory as to what could have happened to Beau?
No. No, matter of fact, whenever our investigator kept trying to talk to him, they would get in screaming matches and he didn't want to talk to him.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All right. Did anybody ever look up Walt's criminal record?
no.
Okay, and I don't even have his last name here. I don't know if I've looked that up for you or not. I don't remember. Okay.
He has a
But-
photography business, and I have his last name. I have his last
Okay.
name. And I know he has a photography business.
Okay. Well, don't mention it here. Maybe you give it
Yeah, I'll give it
afterwards,
to you
and
offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I have to ask this. This may seem like an unusual direction to go, but I have to ask this. Did any of these gay men? Of course, we have Blake, we have Walt.
And I don't know that he's gay, but I'm assuming he is if they were
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
have a
Well,
date.
if Beau was thinking about checking him out, obviously Beau thought he was gay, and then
Yeah.
we have Walt. And we have Jason, who it seems like they were going on the outs, etc. Did any of them ever get the idea that Beau might have been starting to question his sexuality? The reason I ask is because we have to remember that Beau went to this massage place where it seems like the only masseuses there were women, and as I've already told you in a prior conversation, I looked this place up, and it is one of those places that has a reputation for being X-rated. I'm just going to say that way because it's a PG-rated program. But there's that, and it's only women who work there. But then also that the address that he was going to was the address of a woman who, yes, she might have had an addiction problem, but dare I say it, Joe Good was an attractive woman. Any idea that could have been something going along those lines with any of this?
Well, real
And
quick, the our guy on the street who interviewed the masseuse, she was licensed. We did look her up. She was a
yeah,
licensed masseuse. But she was like 60 something years old.
yeah,
No, anyway,
yeah,
you're here or there. But
yeah.
I mean, as you know, Beau had a lot of friends, both straight and gay.
Hmm.
So, I don't necessarily assume everybody he hangs out with is gay
No,
because
I'm
he
not
had
either.
both straight and gay friends.
Yeah.
So I really don't have an answer to that question. I don't know.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to this. Obviously, you've put in a lot of work, and we have to remember this is a disappearance that is only a year and a couple months old. But despite that, we have all this information, all this Uber information. We have banking information. Um, we have the information, on all these different people and addresses and locations. We have video and everything else. Maybe this is at a time. Maybe you could give a shout out to all the people who have helped you with this,
Oh yeah, I was
so
gonna. Yep.
far. Well, let's do that right now. I
Yeah.
know some of their names, but why don't you just give a shout out to all these people right now?
Right. Well, like I said, they were the angels on the ground. Joannis and Jason Shaw. They did, and also his girlfriend, and her name escapes me. I'm sorry, Megan. They went to soup kitchens. They hung posters for 8 hours a day on a Saturday and a Sunday. They went to just every homeless shelter, street outreaches. They interviewed anybody they could get their hands on. So they worked very diligently. And like I said, and Joe wasn't going to give up. He did every trick in the book that he could because he
Hmm.
knows a lot of tricks in the book because
Yep.
he actually works at a facility. But I have a very precious friend, Julie White, who has really dug her heels in, and she's just almost like she's obsessed with this, and she wants Beau to come home. She's a childhood friend of mine who happens to live in LA. And then Brett is a friend of Beau's from the Houston days. And, he and Beau had one of those kind of relationships where they wouldn't talk for 6 months, but then they'd catch up and then, they would call each other on their birthdays. Beau would call him and say, "Hey, happy birthday, buddy." And matter of fact, he was sitting here in October. The last time he called Brett for his birthday, he was here. But Brett has been phenomenal. He's called everybody and shook in every cage he could. And he says, that he's just not going to give up. He does not believe, you know, he said, something has to break,
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, so many things have not really brought us any solid leads, or nothing substantial, but we did all kinds of legwork. But we had so much help. We had a lot of people who worked tirelessly to help us. Um, and yeah, but it seems like all awareness of everything has just stopped. And so, possibly with this podcast, somebody's going to, you know, somebody knows something or somebody saw something. I mean, maybe somebody will come forward. You know what I mean? I mean, I am
Yeah.
not going to believe that he's gone until I have proof, but I mean, there's a reason for all this. There's an answer. He didn't just fall off the face of the earth. Is there foul play involved? I don't know. But one thing that I know that I want to say is that, I I definitely do not want him to be portrayed in a negative light because
Yeah.
he has done so much good in his life and he has helped so many people. And, I don't like saying these words, but if he did possibly relapse and that is something that has caused his demise, I mean, he's my son. He's a person. He's a human being who did so much good in his life. And I mean, he's helped so many people. And, I always want to just advocate for my son.
Yeah.
I think it's very sad that the police are kind of jaded, with their homeless population going on. And it's just ridiculous what's going on out there. The homeless encampments everywhere. And I think that the police have just given up. And I also think that they have a bias against anybody who has had a former substance abuse disorder. I mean, in this day and age, there should not be a stigma, it's everywhere, and it affects every family. But I feel like the cops just kind of throw the case in a pile and say, they'll show up when they're ready. They don't want to take it seriously. I mean, this is a son. This is a man's life. This is a son. This is a brother. This is a person. He's a businessman. He matters. And I don't want people to just think that he doesn't matter. And it seems like that they just want to write off anybody who has ever had a history of substance abuse as not mattering and not worth their time. So, I mean, this has most definitely been the worst year or 433 days of my life.
Of course.
And, people think I'm strong and I'm holding it together, but I am doing that specifically for my Beau. I'm staying strong for him. I vowed the day that he went missing that I was going to hold it together and I was not going to fall apart. I was going to be strong for him, but I would not wish this on my worst enemy. It is the most helpless feeling to not know where a loved one is, to know if they're safe from harm, if they're alive or dead. And for a mother, it's like one of your limbs is missing.
Yeah.
So, this ongoing anguish that I live with is just not sustainable. This anticipatory grief is something that a person, and so many of us, I'm not the only mother that's going through this. So many of us have to deal with, and it's just horrible. We have to find him and bring him home.
You brought up, possibly if he relapsed. I just have to ask the people who knew him best, his mentor, his advisor down there in LA, did any of these people ever give you the idea that, maybe they thought he was, struggling with that part of his life before he went missing? Did any of them give you that indication?
Well, everybody knew that Beau was very stressed. He had, he was once, he just needed a break, and I kept telling him, well, why don't you just turn the reins over to somebody else and take a year off or something and see if you can't, just de-stress your life. And then, he wanted to get healthy was the exact words he said. He said, Mom, I just want to get healthy, and I say that, and it's not easy for me to say because, I only want the best for my son. Yeah. But I would be an idiot if I sat here and said, oh, he would never relapse. I mean, anybody who's ever worked in any kind of addiction circles knows that it's an ongoing battle they fight every day. So if I tried to pretend that it's not possible that he relapsed, then that would be very stupid on my part. I don't want it to have happened. I don't want it to have happened. I don't.
Right.
But I'm just saying if it did, then it,
I guess what I'm saying is those people
who thinks
those people who knew him best, who were seeing him almost every day, who have experience in this area of drug addiction and recovery and everything. I'm asking you, did any of them get the feeling in talking to him, and let's say in the month before, that he might have been struggling with staying sober? That's all I'm asking.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Because of the overwhelming stress that he had.
Okay.
I believe so.
All right. I appreciate you being honest on that. Do you have a Facebook page, website, anything like that set up for Beau's disappearance? You can, if so, please let the people know what that is right now.
Oh, I'm not good with this group. I've tried to do what I could for it, but I believe it's help find Beau Mann. I know I have a shortcut to it, whatever the shortcut is, and he's wearing a tuxedo. The other picture of him is just his face, just a close up of his face. But and then there is another one too that is not my page. That is a picture of him with green grass in the background and a blue shirt, but that one's not mine. Yeah, but mine is help find Beau Mann, and
Okay.
I've asked people to help me. Are you good at this group page stuff? Because I really want to get that thing going and have some interest. If anybody will help me or take it over, I would love it. But
Okay, so help find Beau Mann. Okay, and is that where people should know? Because I'm going to post at least probably a screenshot of it. Is this where the interaction with Joe Good happened, where she got into an argument?
no, sir, no, sir. That was on the other one that
Okay.
his ex Jason runs, and
Okay.
like I said, the picture on that one is Beau's
Okay.
wearing a blue shirt and a green grass in the background, but that's not my page.
Okay. All right. I'll
And
remember that.
that is the page where the Joe Good interaction was going on. Yes.
All right. So okay. Thank you. Any final words before we complete this interview, Amy?
Well, like I said again, I just want to thank everybody who's been involved in helping us find Beau. And I believe in my heart of hearts that we are going to find him and bring him home. I just hope that anybody who has any kind of tip would let us know or let the LAPD know, because somebody had to have seen something. Somebody knows something. I mean, it's I believe he's coming home. We're all grieving in the family in different ways, but I'm not giving up hope. And I want to thank you for allowing me to have this platform. I'm not somebody who is very I'm camera shy, I guess is the best way to put it. I don't like to be on camera, but I just need to get the word out there if at all possible. I want my boy home. It's a family who loves him, and we're here with open arms. We can't wait to see him again. We've just got to find him.
Well, you're welcome, Amy, and I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you very much, Ed. It was
You're
a
welcome.
pleasure.
You're welcome. And that was my February 6th, 2023 interview with Amy Mann, mother of Beau Mann. I thank her for appearing on both audio and video for this episode. As mentioned in the interview, I've produced a map analysis video that you can now find on the Unfound podcast channel on YouTube. I believe understanding Beau's movements that day are very, very, very important to getting the clearest picture of his disappearance. Please watch the video. To begin the summation, and this is a long one, I will play the conversation two people connected to Beau's family had with Joe Good concerning Beau's disappearance. At the time, Joe lived at 1338 Berkeley Street in Santa Monica, the destination in Beau's Uber app. The recording runs for about 10 minutes. On a side note, Amy sent me a ton of pictures of documents and screenshots. All of it can be found on Facebook in the group or on the page or on the website, theunfoundpodcast.com. Back to the recording. This talk was done at least 45 days after Beau went missing. So this was only a few weeks before Joe got on Facebook and got very sarcastic with the people going after her on there. I leave it up to you to determine whether you believe her or not. I've edited out the name of the woman Joe mentions during the conversation. Coincidentally, the woman who is mentioned, I will call her Ariel, is also the person I tracked down all on my own to find out more details about Joe and what usually went on at her apartment in Santa Monica. And weirdly, I tracked Ariel down before I ever knew she was the topic of discussion for this recording.
That he would have gotten kidnapped or beat up or anything like that. I've never heard anything like that in that culture. But definitely, this girl that I was hanging out with had a family. She had kids that were taken away. She had her husband was living downtown. And just her whole life went to shit, and she still didn't stop. And she was a nice woman, but she was living in her car, and she just couldn't do it.
Couldn't hold it, yeah.
She had everything going for her.
What was her name again? What's her last name?
I can't remember right now, but I've been sick myself, so
Okay.
I don't have any memory right now because they just had a seizure last week.
Oh, jeez.
Like an Irish last name or something.
Okay.
But she calls me every once in a while asking for help, so I'll ask her.
Please.
All his information is here, kind of.
Sort of, yeah. You can hang on to that. I'll give you my phone number directly, and then you can contact me if you hear from. And then hopefully I can reach out to her, or at the very least get her some help too, because we're involved with treatment centers and stuff like that. So, if any of your friends need help,
I would love to offer her some place, but at least it has nothing to give for it. Like she has no insurance or money.
Yeah,
So
well, I know the
think she
Claire
can-
Foundation is close by from here, and they take Medi-Cal.
Yeah, I know about Claire.
Yeah, if she gets Medi-Cal, maybe she could get into Claire or something. But yeah, I mean, that's tough when you're trying to help people, and those types of
screw you
situations
over.
happen.
Yeah.
To the best of your recollection, you never can recall, a guy looking like that, or even maybe with a baseball cap on, coming over with a backpack, or what about a taller gentleman a black guy by the name of Walt? Does that ring any bell? No.
I don't know any Waltz.
What about Blake? Any Blakes come over through here? Blake tattoos.
I'm trying to remember. It's like they all have tattoos.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember this last guy who was here for a while. It's like
It's like
I don't know. They all look familiar to me.
Yeah.
She had so many people that were disguised as nice people who lied to me and screwed me over.
How long ago was it that you asked her to leave?
Mm-hmm.
That was November.
November?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I went out of town to St. Louis for a period of time, and she had all these people in when I wasn't here, just destroyed my place. And
Was that in November or early December?
I think that was early December by then. Yeah.
Interesting.
How long has it been? When was the last time you saw him?
November
probably
30th.
Yeah, it's probably about
wow.
that time.
Wow. Yeah, when I came home, all my furniture was everywhere, and there's bottles of Jack Daniels just thrown on the floor, and they'd robbed me and stolen my clothes, and really, those people just have no ethics or morals. Even
yeah.
people who were totally normal 6 months before.
Yep. Yeah, that's how bad this disease is.
Really weird.
Yeah.
Meth especially,
Meth
though.
is
I've never
bad.
seen anything like it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
I would like to know more about whatever treatment you guys know about, because I still have a lot of friends who want treatment and
I'll give you my
are
card.
in and out of drug life. Yeah.
Sure. I'll leave you
That'd be great.
I'll leave you 2 cards of me and a friend of mine, and we work in treatment centers, so.
I think my friend Amber just went to Claire.
Really?
Yeah, for detox. For detox and then sober living or something.
Okay. So this is me. I work at Impact,
Oh yeah.
and this is a friend of mine. She works in a.
What's Impact again?
It's a drug and alcohol treatment center.
Okay, I've heard of that too, right?
Yeah.
It's the best
Yeah,
treatment center.
we're pretty well renowned.
Yeah, Impact, Claire and
Cry help.
Cry Help. Yeah, that's like court ordered stuff.
A lot of them.
A lot of
we
them,
get
yeah.
a lot of
But-
stuff, but we also get a lot of people that just, hey, they got nowhere to go.
Tarzana Treatment Center.
Tarzana.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've been working at Impact for about 5-6 years now. So, anybody.
Do you know where somebody can find a sober
Sober living?
companion, a person that stays with them or does detox with them at home?
Yes, I'm actually involved with a company like that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
My brother wants somebody like that.
What's your brother's name?
Greg.
Okay, well, Yeah, I do. My sponsor actually does that. So they have a company that does that specifically.
Really?
Yeah. If you want to give me your number, I could.
Let me break down your number too.
Yeah,
Definitely.
definitely.
Important and kind of soon. Hold on. Okay.
Okay. So.
Okay, my name's Joe.
Joe.
Joe Good, yeah.
My name
This
is Joe as well.
Joe.
Hi.
Nice
Okay.
to meet
My
you.
name is Jason.
Jason, hi.
It's nice to meet you, Joe.
Thank you. Hi.
Nice to meet you. So yeah, you can write down our numbers there, and then so my number is area code 626-210.
Okay.
And you have my card.
Mm-hmm. And then
And if you want, you can put my cell phone.
I just remembered who she was staying with. This girl staying with some guy named Allie who was living on the streets, and just a nightmare. This guy was a sociopath, I'm sure of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just craziness. But he almost looks like your brother. Who is this?
My brother.
Your brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beau. Yeah. He looks very familiar to him.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother's nothing like a sociopath. He's a teddy bear.
Yeah.
But so
Is he?
Yeah. That's
good to know.
Sure you haven't seen him ever?
I'm sure. I would remember.
Okay.
But I did just have a seizure last week, and my memory is bad this week.
Sure.
So maybe
It's,
it will come up.
Yeah.
Let me write-
Yeah.
Let me just ask around. I know
I would
a lot of this
appreciate that.
program, or a lot of this culture, because of my brother and
There is a
other friends
reward,
that I have
too.
on drugs.
There's a reward too.
Yeah?
Any information leading to it.
Any
leading
good
to
feeling would be a reward. That would be lovely to be able to help somebody.
save a
There
life.
you go.
Yeah.
That's why we're out
Save
here.
a life and save a family.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That would
his
be-
40th birthday is coming up, and
It's
you know,
heartbreaking. I
Next
really
week.
think it is.
Yeah.
I was an addict for a long time too, and
Yeah,
Sure.
it was just a nightmare. Yeah.
yeah.
When's his birthday?
Next week, his mother is just like out of sorts. You know, she misses her son and wants to be a part of his life, and obviously celebrate his birthday. And you know,
God.
It's for my brother back.
You'd think you'd get some kind of maybe he's just too ashamed, you know?
that's kind of where my thought process is that he's just wrapped up in guilt. And,
Yeah, that's the way I felt. I never wanted to contact my
and
family. I was
shame
so
and
embarrassed.
embarrassment and stuff,
Yeah.
and you know, asking for help, you know, is definitely tough, you know.
But you got money in this company. At least he can take care of himself. Thank God for that. He doesn't have to do anything shady to even get his drugs. That's
Well,
good.
he's not drawing from that right now. That's what's you
Yeah,
can't find
that's
him.
the thing.
He's not drawing from any of his money.
Oh, that sucks.
Would you be able to write down your phone number? Maybe I could
Oh, yeah, let me- I'll
reach
give
out
you a
to
card.
you.
Hold on.
Thank you.
I know.
Yeah, I'm here most of the time because I have this jewelry company and I make handmade
Oh, yeah,
jewelry, so I
yeah.
work from home.
Okay.
cool.
Very cool.
Sweet ass jewelry.
Sweet
Nice.
ass jewelry. There you go. Cool name. Very cool
Very
name.
cool.
Thanks.
Right.
Well, you know, listen, Joe, we appreciate all your
Yeah.
time.
So it hasn't been that
obviously.
long, though. It's not that long. We're only early February. It's only a couple months now.
Couple months.
Well, a couple months.
I've seen people like this disappear for more than that, longer than that.
Yeah. But,
They would
it's-
tell you if they saw him in jail, like they have to tell you that. if
Well, you
he's
can
in
look
jail.
him up online.
You
His
can
name
look
will
up,
come
yeah.
up, you know.
Right.
So, but listen, yeah, we're just desperately trying to get this guy back to his.
So the cops have looked for him then? Or
Yeah,
that
but
he's not in jail?
there's only 8 detectives for the missing persons unit for all of LA County. So after about 2 weeks, they kind of, if the case runs cold, then they kind of give up their search.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
where I came in and where Joe's coming in on the weekend. So,
I could see you
looking
guys
for-
being driven crazy by that. That would drive me crazy. Just
so,
not,
so
not
that girl's
knowing
name
like
you
that.
said
Irish last name.
Damn it. Yeah, I can give you a call or a text when I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate
Because I
it.
usually know her last name. I don't know why
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
coming to me right
When
now.
it comes to you, and,
Yeah,
and
just
again, if,
contact Jason because you have his
Yeah.
his cell phone number.
and if any other information that pops into your head, you'd be like, oh, I remembered something. Text me anything at all. Just be like, oh, I vaguely remember her talking about some guy named Blake or some guy named Walt or
It
Beau.
completely
or anything
changes
like
people.
that.
Yeah. So sad.
Mhm.
So much crime, and their bodies get so destroyed so quickly.
How long have you been clean now?
For maybe a year and a half. Not that long.
That's
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
a miracle.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. No,
it's
that's
good.
good. That's very good.
Every day is a miracle.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Um,
Okay, so let me know if you guys need anything.
Call
And
me.
I'll let you know.
Please. Okay?
Okay.
Please call me.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck, sweetheart.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As you heard the two guys say in the recording, Joe did not look good at all. Specifically, they mentioned dirt under her fingernails while she went back inside to get her business card, I think. So, although Joe sounded sober during that talk, she was in the depths of her addiction, something that I believe lasted until she died in January of 2023. Amy and I talked about Beau and Joe having mutual friends on Facebook, although they were not direct friends on there. However, there is another connection between the two that I mentioned early in the interview, but Amy and I never got around to talking about it. Joe and Beau both attended the Passages Recovery Facility in Malibu, California. What is unclear is if they were there at the same time. Regarding Ariel, not her real name, who was friends with Joe and lived with her for a while, the big issue is that the way Joe described their relationship in the recording is exactly the opposite of the way Ariel described it to me. Ariel said she left voluntarily. Joe says she kicked her out. Ariel said she couldn't continue to take Joe's addiction. Whereas Joe, as you heard, said Ariel was allowing all sorts of bad people in and they were destroying Joe's apartment. Of course, both women cannot be telling the truth. Who is? I'll leave that up to you. What is consistent, though, between both of them is they both say they had never heard of Beau Mann until well after he disappeared. And really, that's the most important point. I will leave it up to you to determine the honesty of that. I have my own opinions, but you know I don't tell you what to think. Plus, my belief could eventually be proven to be wrong. Maybe the most interesting point is Joe in the recording seems to be pointing the finger at Ariel and a guy she knew as being responsible or possibly responsible for Beau's disappearance. However, in my talking to Ariel, once again, not her real name, not once has she ever stated that she thought Joe could be involved in Beau's disappearance. In fact, Ariel denies that Joe would have ever had anything to do with anything like that. Something to think about. Moving on. What about the Uber driver? Did he tell two different stories or didn't he? We must remember that just like Joe, nobody tracked him down until 2 months later. So unless Kyle actually had something to do with Beau's disappearance, I doubt Kyle would even remember Beau. That doesn't mean Kyle couldn't be a suspect, but we have to decide whether we're smart to consider him based on comments made by Kyle like 60 days later. Because at least in the public sphere, there's no physical evidence to suspect him. But Ed, the 911 text, Beau was in the car with Kyle when it happened. True, but I want you to really examine that text before jumping to any conclusions. Really look at the words. For example, many of you know I had a scary Lyft ride about 2 years ago between the Tampa airport and my condo. It did not get to the point where I texted 911, but had I think what I would have said would have been different than what Beau wrote. My guess is you also wouldn't write what Beau did if you were in the same situation. So this is something to consider. The answers to all of this are certainly somewhere. I just wish I knew what ride to take to get there. For my deeper insights and personal theory on what happened to Beau Mann, please go to patreon.com/unfound podcast to sign up. You may even learn a thing or two. For now, I'll leave the public theorizing up to you. And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.